Shut up, fool!
You can't help but smile like a little bitch.
Hey, man! This makes sense!
Myron, you got to put the overlay. See, I got to go like that. If you do it the other way around, then Liz Jackson's in front of me. I got to be in front of her. Myron, I know capturing Christianity doesn't get a lot of views. I understand that. I know that most people don't care, but I'm trying to help him. I'm supporting the apologetic empire. Just shut up and do your... Sorry. Oh, we're live. Sorry you guys had to hear that. Let's see. Who was here first? We had Travis. You're a mod. Do I give you points as a mod? I guess so. 10,000 Pine points to you, Travis. I will be thinking about you today. Daniel da Silva, my favorite Brazilian. 5,000 Pine points to you. See you in a few hours at poker. Poker tonight. If you want to join us for poker, email me. If you don't know how to email me, go to the About tab on my YouTube channel. There's my email address. You can email me. I'll send you a link. $20 buy-in for the tournament. Deep stack this time. 2,000 chips. $20 gets you 2,000 chips. Blinds escalate. And we see who the best poker player in the world is here today. The PineCreek Poker Channel. Third place, Daniel C. Oh, two Daniels made the top three. Am I in time? Yes, you are. 1,000 Pine points to you. And Joe Sony, you're usually a winner, but today you're a loser. And it is sad. I agree. This is called Why We Should Want God to Exist. I found this very interesting because when you can't when you can't demonstrate that your God exists, it's better first to desire your concept of God to exist, and then it makes it easier to believe and find the evidence for the type of God you have in your brain to exist. It's as simple as that. If you really, really want this God to exist, you will find ways to make it real, to find evidence. But I thought I would flip it and talk about why we should not want God to exist. So maybe I should start with the headline. And people in the live stream chat, I like to be interactive here. Why do you think it's a good reason not to want God to exist? First of all, you have to have a concept of God in your brain. But I watched this already, and they didn't, out of the gate, they didn't define which God, and what's the nature of this God. So I'm not going to do it either then. I'm just going to say things and then have theists go, but that's not my God. Well, I don't care. Reasons to not want God to exist. Cognitive dissonance is at an all-time low when you stop believing that God exists, when you don't desire a God to exist. You don't have to reconcile bad things happening in your life with the will of God. I mean, you can just say, excuse my French, but you can just say crap happens. And there's no reason for it. Another reason to desire to not want God to exist is the whole idea of justice. If you put justice in the hands of God, then you're less likely to, I don't know, have this oomph, this gumption in you to want to have justice here on planet Earth. Wars. I mean, atheists have done some bad things in the past, but at least they don't have, at least they're not saying things like, you better listen to me because God's on my side and I can hurt you here on planet Earth, but just you wait. My God's going to hurt you even more in the afterlife. Atheists can't say that. So divine wars kind of goes away, right? So you should not want God to exist, because then someone like George W. Bush can say, well, Gog and Magog represents Iran and Iraq and Russia, and I prayed about it, and God told me, go ahead and invade. None of that happens if you don't believe God exists, right? I apologize, Mark Von Wisco. This is Sunday, and this is church, and I was planning to keep my language clean. So forgive me, Christians and Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists and whatever, Jews, for saying the word crap. Crap is not that bad though, right? It's not as bad as the SHIT word. Okay, what are some other reasons why you should desire to not want God to exist? Well, the whole idea of God decreeing and sanctioning certain people to go to hell. I mean, creating people knowing what would happen. Like that leaves a bad feeling in your soul, right? My daughter, God decreed her to go to hell. Oh, you don't have that sadness anymore. Oh, and the most importantly, well, I'm forgetting the big one, right? A good reason why you should not want God to exist, because then you can just live in your sin. But if there's no God, then there is no sin. But anyhow, you know what I mean, right? How can you live in your sin if you desire God to exist? By the way, why is sin bad? I mean, why are some Christians and Muslims so concerned about sinning against God? I wonder if there's any Christians or Muslims here who can answer that for me. Why is it such a big deal to sin against your God? The God, I should say. I wonder if you can articulate that for me. Is it because you think if you sin against God, he's going to hurt you? Or is it more or less you just love him so much that you just want to do what he says you should do, that he wills you to do? But if that's the case, why? Like, there's many married people listening right now, and there's many times where your spouse doesn't agree with what you want to do, but you do it anyhow. And then your spouse gets a little upset or sad, but, whatever. Why can't that be the case with God? Why is sin that bad? And I think for most theists, it has to do with the afterlife, right? You're just scared. You're scared if you do enough sinning, God will not let you into heaven. And therefore you go to hell. Am I right? Like, this whole concept of God usually involves strength, power, might. You really think you can make God cry with your sins? Really? I don't think so. Okay, let's listen to Dr. Liz Jackson.
Kind of fun to bring it back full circle and do another in-person interview. So,
I know,
yeah.
and today we're talking about the axiology of theism, and that's a really fancy way of saying we're just asking the question: should you want God to exist?
Exactly.
Right? Do I have all this right?
Yeah. So axiology means value. So another way to think about it is, what would the value of God's existence be? Would it be a good thing? Would it be a bad thing? Would it be a neutral thing? And then that has implications for whether we should want God to exist.
Okay.
So
let's talk about, I guess, to start things off, let's talk about like a non-theistic, something that has value. So like, I don't know, you just got married recently, or you had some wedding receptions recently. So like a diamond ring has value. Should you want a diamond ring? Is that kind of like how should we think about it like that?
I mean, you can think about it like that. And you could say that the questions might come apart in some cases of whether it would be good that God exists or whether it's valuable that God exists, and then whether we should want God to exist.
Okay.
However, I think one way that people...
I started this at the beginning. I want everybody to notice one huge thing. Now, this is supposed to be the intellectual side of Christianity. This is supposed to be more philosophically minded. And so I say this because they should know better. We're a minute 38 seconds in, and we're going to see how long it takes before they define what God is. Because in order to answer the question, why should we want God to exist, you have to know what God is first. If God's a banana, do we want bananas to exist? Well, they kind of taste good. They're rich in potassium. Let's see how long it takes.
At least generally kind of think about things is beliefs aim at the truth and desires aim at the good. So you want your beliefs to be true and you want to desire things that are good. So if it were a good thing that God existed, if it were a valuable thing that God existed, then at least a lot of us, you might think, should value and desire God to exist.
Yeah, no, that's a good distinction between desire and belief.
Yeah.
And I kind of just like want to stop the interview and just think about that for like 10 minutes, but I can't. Okay,
Yeah.
so how, where should we start with this question? Like, what's a
Yeah, where should we start? Maybe with the definition of God.
good place to set a foundation?
So I like to kind of back up when I introduce this and sort of talk about three big questions you might have when thinking about philosophy of religion. So the first, probably a super familiar one, is what you might call the ontology of theism. So that's just the question of whether God exists or not. And that's where, you know, the fine-tuning and cosmological and ontological arguments would come in, and the problem of evil and hiddenness.
See, isn't that epistemology? No, I'm not a philosopher. But when you're talking about argumentation for God, that's the epistemology to get to the ontology, right? Am I wrong? Forgive me, I'm not a sophisticated philosopher, but is there any philosophers in the live stream chat that tell me if I'm right or wrong about this?
These are debates that are relevant to the ontological question. The second question, and the question that I've done quite a bit of work on, is what you might call the epistemological question.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the question of whether we should believe that God exists. Is it
What? No, the epistemological question is how do you know God exists, right? Am I wrong? Is the doctor of religion, philosophy, whatever, Liz Jackson, saying things that are not true here? Joshua, you're philosophically minded. Am I wrong here?
question? The second question, and the question that I've done quite a bit of work on, is what you might call the epistemological question.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the question of whether we should believe that God exists. Is it
What? It's a question of should we believe? That's the epistemological question. I'm not wrong here, am I?
rational to believe in God? And, you know, I've talked about faith, Pascal's wager, all that stuff. So I think in philosophy of religion, those two questions, they've gotten quite a bit of attention.
Mm-hmm.
But this is why I think the axiological question is so interesting, because it is kind of a natural third question. Should we want God to exist? Could it be rational to desire God's existence? And I think that question, there's been a little bit of literature on it, but significantly less than the ontological and the epistemological question.
Yeah, and I actually think this will become a bigger thing in the future because what I said earlier, you cannot demonstrate that your God exists. By definition, God cannot be put in a test tube. You cannot analyze it. He's outside space, time, and matter. So since we can't demonstrate it the way these atheists, you know, selfishly want us to demonstrate it, we have to go to the desires, the pragmatics. By the way, I don't think this is a bad strategy on their behalf because I think this is all they have. This is why when I'm asked what's the best argument for God, without defining it, I use things like the argument from beauty. And it gets to the heartstrings. And I think that's what they're trying to do here.
So I think that's kind of a helpful way to set it up. Does God exist? Should we believe in God? And then should we desire God?
These different distinctions are really helpful. Yeah, the ontological question, the epistemological question, and then the axiological question.
Yeah.
And it's really about this desire component, should we want God to exist?
Yeah, the thing is, if you've already answered the ontological question by using the epistemology, reliable epistemology, then your desire should almost be, who cares at this point? Like, I really desire not to have cancer. I really desire that. Well, sorry, Doug, the doctor said you have cancer. Yeah, but I desire it not to be the case. Well, who cares? Right? You either have cancer or you don't have cancer. And if you want to live, you will take steps to, I guess that's where the desire comes in. If you want to live, you'll take steps to solve that problem. But still, your desires should have nothing to do with the ontological. It might have something to do with the epistemology of what method you use to arrive at the truth of the ontology. I'm using big words here, guys. Yay!
Like this distinction is because, I mean, there's something that gets brought up a lot by atheists and skeptics, is that, like, you know, Christians just want Christianity to be true, and that's like almost a reason to be skeptical. It's like we should be skeptical when our desires are for something that's true. Like, we should be skeptical of that, right?
Yeah.
Because our
What? You should be skeptical when your desires are for something. You don't know the truth yet.
desires lead us astray so often. So,
Yeah.
you know, should we be so skeptical just in virtue of the fact that we do want this to be true?
Yeah, I mean, I think I see what they're saying, but I don't totally agree. So I do think, yeah, like wishful thinking isn't rational.
Right.
And if our evidence like just clearly points to atheism, it's like 99% likely God doesn't exist, but we're just kind of like, well, I want God to exist, so like forget that or whatever, and then you choose to believe in God. I mean, you know, you could say, at least from an epistemic perspective or from a perspective of what's called evidentialism, which means you should proportion your beliefs to the evidence, that seems irrational, right? But I think there's two things you can say here. I mean, one is thinking about a case where your evidence doesn't clearly point to atheism, but your evidence is maybe more ambiguous, or maybe it's balanced between theism and atheism. And I think in a case like that, if there's kind of like what you might call an epistemic tie, then I think you could go with the desirable hypothesis.
Okay. This is very interesting. She's saying that if it's an epistemic tie, then maybe you should go with your desires. Show me anyone on planet Earth that thinks, I think they exist, let me be clear, but show me, is there anyone here who thinks it's close to an epistemic tie between atheism and theism? I mean, the people who have actually looked into it, I bet you most theists say, no, it's not even close. It's not close to a tie. Theism wins, right? And then the atheists are going to say, no, there's no evidence. There's no demonstration of your God. It's not even close to a tie. The people who actually think it's close to a tie, raise your hand in the live stream chat. I want to talk to you maybe after this, because I think there's very few people on planet Earth who thinks this is close to an epistemic tie.
At least as far as your evidence is in this position where it's tied. But I also think, even if your evidence does point to atheism, desires come into play when thinking about how you should act, the rationality of action. And there are a lot of cases, we even talked about some of these actually in our last in-person interview, where something's unlikely, but because of your desires, it's actually rational to act on that thing. And I think,
Oh, if something's unlikely, it's still rational to act on your desires on that thing. Okay, she's describing Christianity, right?
I think in that interview I gave an example of your brother who goes missing,
Yeah.
and it becomes increasingly likely that he's dead or gone forever or whatever, but because it would be such a good thing if you did find him, you continue to act as if he's still alive.
Yeah, and then you ruin the rest of your life with this false hope, and you can't do anything else, because if you truly believe your brother who's gone missing is alive, you're going to continue to search, right? Because he might be suffering in the wilderness. You got to find him.
And so it could be
Yeah.
kind of like an action-oriented consideration. Even if desires don't affect what you should believe, they could affect how you should act.
I think about when it comes to that question of like, should we just be skeptical of stuff that we want to be true? I mean, to me, it's like kind of you've got to take everything case by case.
Yeah.
You can't, especially with something like that, you can't just like stop. Like, okay, you want this thing to be true, therefore you should just be skeptical and withhold belief in that thing. You know, because it case by case basis, there's counterexamples to that. Just like, you know, I desire food, I desire red curry for lunch, and that doesn't mean that I should be skeptical of the existence of red curry.
Well, there's evidence for red curry. You can touch it, taste it, smell it, weigh it, and you can do that with different biases. I mean, it's so... How much does God weigh if we put him on a scale? What color is God? If we put God through a mass spectrometer, what elements would come through?
Right?
Absolutely.
So
it depends on your evidence. Yeah.
So sometimes your desires can line up with the truth, and so it's got to be like a case-by-case basis. You can't just apply this skeptical principle broadly to every situation where you desire something.
There's tons of things that we both believe are true and we want to be true, like that your wife is an awesome lady, like you both believe that and you want it to be true. And it would be totally silly to think.
Yeah, how many times in history has a spouse trusted their wife, husband, and said, no, my spouse would never do such a thing. Only later to find out that they did. A mother of a son who's committed murder is going to be less likely to see the evidence objectively because she loves her son. If you love Jesus as a Christian, you're less likely to see the evidence of the Gospels objectively. If you respect and fear Allah, you're less likely to see the evidence of the Quran objectively. So you ought to, in my opinion, be a little more guarded with your deeply held beliefs.
I think that everything we want to be true, that somehow gives us evidence that it's false or it's unlikely. I mean, and again, I get what they're saying, you want to be careful you're not engaging in wishful thinking and believing something that's super unlikely, but at the same time, you take it way too far.
Is it wishful thinking to think that the Apostle Paul actually saw the risen Jesus? Is it wishful thinking to say that Jesus actually appeared in front of 500 people bodily? Is it wishful thinking to think that the gospel authors accurately, maybe 99% accurately portrayed what Jesus said and did? Is it wishful thinking that there's a heaven and there's a hell, there's a purgatory, and that someday Jesus will return on a white horse to gather up his children? Is it wishful thinking that if you're driving a car and there's a semi-truck coming right at you, that God will protect you, put a hedge of protection around you, and miraculously move the car out of the way? Is it wishful thinking that if you have a child, that God will protect them every day at school so they won't get hurt?
Desire just automatically gives us reason to be skeptical.
Yeah. I guess if I want to be maximally charitable to this view, most people are sort of scared of death and scared of the unknown and what happens, and also, when you lose someone that you love and you want to see them again, and that's one of the things that's kind of driving this desire for theism to be true, or for Christianity in particular to be true, because Christianity teaches that we're going to be resurrected and spend time with everyone for eternity. So,
okay, we're 7 minutes 39 seconds in. They still haven't defined God. And I understand that Cameron's a Christian, and I think Liz Jackson's a Christian. But these are intellectual Christians. These are philosopher types. They need to define this God that we ought to desire, right?
There are these different, I think, elements that are sort of...
Joshua, genetics. God made me this way. That's how you get a jawline like this.
Really deep and fundamental to us. And maybe that's what the skeptic is kind of getting at, is that those things, it seems really easy to see why someone would desire that, even if it's false. And so does that, did I add anything, or is the response going to be different to that?
I think what you're kind of doing, so in the axiology, I'll back up for a second. In the axiology of theism, there's basically two positions. And there's a few others, but the two main ones are pro-theism, the view that God's existence would be a good thing, or we should want God to exist, and then anti-theism, which is the view that God's existence would be a bad thing, or we should not want God to exist or even positively desire that God not exist. And what you're kind of doing is you're basically saying there's some strong considerations in favor of pro-theism. We get to see our loved ones again. There's an afterlife. There's ultimate justice in the afterlife, at least on.
Yeah, there's ultimate justice in the afterlife. Again, we got to figure out what God she's talking about. If there's ultimate justice in the afterlife, then a rapist can make a deathbed confession, accept Jesus in his heart sincerely, after being, let's say, a serial rapist of 100 women. All his life, he's lived his life as a rapist, and then makes a confession, and then ends up in paradise for their eternity. Is that the ultimate justice Liz Jackson is talking about?
A lot of versions of theism, right? And so, but here's a really interesting thing, which is pro-theism and anti-theism actually totally cross-cut the theism-atheism debate, right? So just because pro-theism is true doesn't give us reason to think theism's false, right? And in fact, like might even be natural to both believe in God and think God's existence would be a good thing.
This is super helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so
cool.
So going back to the distinction between the ontological question and the axiological question, you can still accept, and I think that's kind of like what I was just getting at, is that there are some good reasons to desire that theism is true. So maybe this question is almost like assuming a good answer to this question is that theism is something that we should desire to be true. But then, it's a completely separate question. I think that's kind of what we arrived at a little bit earlier, is that it's a separate question once we start to look at the evidence, whether something or not is true. And then a completely separate question from that is, what's the appropriate course of action to take with respect to some proposition? So yeah that's super helpful.
Cool.
Okay, where should we go from here? So maybe discuss.
Where you should go from here is define this God that you're talking about. 9 minutes, 45 seconds in, still don't know.
Some different, arguments pro-theism and anti-theism.
Yeah, so, there's a lot to be said here, and we don't have forever, but a couple of considerations in favor of pro-theism, and some of them that I'm actually talking about at this conference, I think a lot of them have to do with the way that God brings about justice and redeems evils. So a really big one would be that if theism is true, either there's no gratuitous or pointless evil, or there's like a lot less. So if atheism is true, lots of evil things happen, a lot of them are pointless, and we don't really have any guarantee that justice is going to be served, or people that are wronged are going to be somehow compensated, or whatever.
There's no guarantee. What is she talking about? What is she talking about? Guarantees of justice? That there's evil, there's no pointless evil? She basically, in order for what she's saying to make sense, she has to define a God who says there is no pointless evil. She's just constructing a God in her brain to fit exactly to what she desires.
But if theism is true, then there's probably a lot less gratuitous evil, especially if God's both all-powerful and all-good. And I think...
Okay, now she's introducing some attributes of God. All-powerful and all-good. Well, what is all-good? All-good could mean slaughtering the Canaanite children, right? That's good, right, Liz?
A lot of theists think there's maybe even no gratuitous evil at all. All evil has some purpose in God's ultimate plan.
I like that you're leaving room open for some...
Yes, Nathan, it's what I said a long time ago, the moral argument. And she's defining good and just as God's goodness, God's justice. But again, she's creating a definition of God in her brain. Why do you think God is all good? Oh yeah, and then she's going to go into philosophy, right? Yeah. What's the ontological? No, is it the ontological argument? Greatest possible being, but does greatest have to mean good? And how are you defining good? You define it using God, right? God has to be all good because God is God.
Theists have argued that God's existence is compatible with some evils being pointless.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you're being sensitive to that. I respect that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so Peter...
Yeah, but here's the problem that, and then why you ought not desire a God to exist. There's Christians even right now today, probably in church, who are crying their eyes out and asking questions like, why did God allow this? Why did God do this? Why hasn't God done this? And they're bawling in church. They're on their knees, and there's a deacon there next to them. I know this is happening right now in many places in the United States and around the world, depending on your time zone. And there's a deacon there, and he has a Kleenex box. And he's saying, it's all going to be good. God has a purpose, and God has reasons. And don't you worry that your 1-year-old died in the pool from drowning. God has, sometimes is mysterious. All that goes away once you stop believing in God. You don't ask those questions anymore.
Has this view in which God has to pick a world and there is no greatest possible world, and so as long as God picks a world above some threshold of goodness, that's permissible. And so depending on what you mean by gratuitous evil, that could be a view on which there's some gratuitous evil.
Isn't Mike Almeida another philosopher who's argued?
I'm less familiar with his argument, but yeah, I think that sounds right. That rings a bell.
Yeah, there's a number of theists that have argued that. It's super interesting. I think Jordan Hampton has actually had someone on to discuss that as well.
So so Klaas Cray is actually one of my colleagues, and he does a bunch of work on the axiology of theism, but also he's done work on gratuitous evil as well. He's a great philosopher. People should go check out his work if they haven't.
I feel like we're getting too much on a tangent here. But
sorry.
So this is one aspect, right, of like something that we should want. One reason why we should be pro-theist.
Yep.
Pro-theism.
Yep.
What's the correct term? Pro-theist?
Pro-theist, if you know.
So that's one consideration.
That's a big one. I'm trying to think of some others. I mean, another one, which is going to be pretty controversial, but some people have argued.
So the first reason to want to believe God exists is this idea of justice. Was that the first one? Yeah, no pointless evil. No pointless evil. Yeah. What if there's a God that exists and doesn't care what happens on planet Earth? Again, they haven't defined who God is.
Argued that God is... there's different ways of putting it, but the best way to ground morality, the only way to ground morality, that's very controversial. Or
wait a minute, whoa. That's controversial? The only way to ground morality is through God? She just admitted that's controversial. But William Lane Craig, I think, says that, well, if there is no God, there's no objective morality. Objective morality exists, therefore God exists, right? And if there's other ways to ground objective morality, then that means that argument it poofs away. Are you saying that William Lane Craig's moral argument is controversial? I thought it was a done deal.
More weakly, the best explanation for why we should be motivated to act morally. And so if you think that God is related to morality in one of these ways, whether that's, the only way to ground morality, the best way, or even just, a way to explain why we should be motivated to act morally, then I think you can both explain how we get moral truths and then also why we should care about those moral truths.
Yeah, and one reason not to believe in a God is that if there's a God that grounds morality, then you could say, taking a sword and shoving it through the heart of an infant could be a good thing because God wanted that to happen for morally sufficient reasons. If you don't believe in a God, you can't use that excuse. You have to say, well, I wanted to do it, or these people wanted to do it, so I did it, or here's the other reasons. But you can't appeal to a deity. But if you're a theist, you can say, yeah, my God wanted me to do this. And if you talk back, you're going against God, and he can smite you, he can hurt you in the afterlife.
And so you would have to then argue that the atheist can't give a similar story, but that's another sort of way you could motivate people.
Oh, Nathan says, I don't think Liz would have a problem saying Craig is wrong on that one. Wow. We should have a debate between Liz Jackson and Dr. William Lane Craig on the moral argument. Have these two theist Christians go at it.
Pro-theism.
Mm-hmm. Why don't we just run through like a list of all the different things that are pro-theism?
Yeah.
In review, and then and also just mention if any of these are controversial. Like
absolutely.
If there's disagreement between people.
Yeah, so I think there's going to be a lot that sort of relate to that problem of evil thing I said first. So I'm just going to kind of lump a bunch of those together.
Would justice fall into that category?
Cosmic justice, Wrongs are
justice.
righted. I think, evildoers are held accountable.
Wrongs are righted. Okay, where does the concept of grace on the Christian God come into play here? If you're a Christian, you've done 10 wrong things, but it's buried. It's been covered in the blood of Jesus. How is that going to be righted again? Doesn't the Bible say that when God, if you put your trust in Jesus, that when God looks at you, he sees you white as snow? But you still did those bad things. You still did those sins. They're just covered up in the blood. So how are they going to be righted again? Now, some Christians actually believe you will be punished a little bit before you go to heaven.
All of that, no gratuitous evil, you could kind of put that under the problem evil. I think that's a pretty weighty one.
You could even do like compensation for, past suffering in your life could fall under that.
Yep.
And that would be a good thing, people, compensation in terms of like, you've got this afterlife that theism sort of.
Yeah. So here you have a woman who's raped. Is the Christian God going to compensate her with heaven when she dies, Cameron? No. A Hindu woman who's, let's say, is raped every day and then she dies brutally, then the real suffering will begin, according to at least some versions of Christianity, right?
Either entails or is part of theism.
Yep, absolutely. So that's kind of a category, but I think that's pretty weighty and has a lot of components to it.
Okay.
So for me, that's a pretty big consideration in favor of pro-theism. There's the morality stuff. And then I think a third one that I think is significant is this idea that if God exists, God's loving, God's powerful, and God wants a relationship with creatures, then God's going to, and this kind of comes...
See, now we're getting to some definitions of who God is. We're getting more and more. Not only is he all good, all-knowing, he wants a relationship with people. How do you know that? What's your epistemology on that? This is just a way for Christians, for Muslims, for theists to feel good, I think. Well, not so much Muslims. They don't really care about relationship with God. They care more about the justice of God. But Christians, yeah, it's very much, I can't go through the day unless I have help. Because I suck so bad at so many things in life. I mean, I need God there with me to help me.
From some of the divine hiddenness stuff. So we're kind of borrowing a premise from that argument. But the idea is that if this kind of God exists, God's going to make himself available to people. He's going to reveal himself in certain ways, and he's going to make it so that...
How do you know all this, Liz Jackson?
As long as you're not resistant, you're not sort of blinding yourself or resistant to having a relationship with God, you can see that God's there. You can see that God exists. So God's going to do God's part in revealing himself and basically making space for there to be a relationship with God. And so what this means is that one of the most important facts about our world, if God exists, which would be the existence of God, that would be revealed to people in some way.
So she's defining God as a God who would want to reveal himself. Okay. We're diving in. We're getting like more of a definition of God here, but it's how do you know that any of that's true? Well, because he said so in the Bible, Doug.
If God exists, if atheism is true, it's not at all clear that we would have this similar kind of access to a super important and fundamental fact about the world.
Is this just crazy
so
talk?
That's what you might call an epistemic consideration. So I know I was saying there's the epistemological question, the axiological question. It does get complicated here, but you could also... There's overlap, but this would actually be under axiology. There's different kinds of value, right? Axiology means...
Yeah, good point, Street Disciple, except if you're a Calvinist. So she's saying, well, if this God exists, he would want to reveal himself to you, and you can experience that, and that's one reason why you would want to believe in God or want God to exist, because he can reveal himself to you. Well, if you're a Calvinist Christian, God will purposely not reveal himself to you for morally sufficient reasons. He will not lick his finger and zap you with the Holy Spirit so you can be regenerated and see the truth using the Holy Spirit. I mean, the specific revelation, to know that you can have this personal relationship with Jesus. You're a Calvinist? No. God might choose not to do these things.
Value, it's like we said. So one kind of value is epistemic value. That might then have implications for the epistemology of theism question, but we can ask questions about what's the epistemic value of God's existence. What kind of things could we know or could we not know if God exists? Some planting in stuff might start to ring a bell here, but I do think this idea that there would be divine revelation is a really important epistemic source and a consideration in favor of protheism.
Yeah.
So the God I've created in my own mind is the God who would reveal himself as a fleshy man and come to earth, and then he'll have disciples, and then he will reveal things to people that will be written down decades later. That's the God I have created in my head. That's exactly what he would do, and so we can know about him.
I think maybe what you were getting as the evolutionary argument against naturalism. Absolutely. Plantinga has argued that, if you're a naturalist and you believe in evolution, then basically you can't know much of anything. Because
what if you're a theist and believe in evolution? Can you know things then? Let's say you're a theist who believe God created everything, but then was hands off and just let evolution take its course. Can you know things then, Cameron?
Your cognitive faculties, it's a very, very low probability that they would be reliable and reliably produce true beliefs.
And
there's a correlation between evolution and survival and truth. I really do think that. And so one of the analogies is, if a elephant remembers using its brain where the watering hole, and he's thirsty, and he remembers, he will survive because he'll go to that watering hole, because the truth is the water's there, and he'll drink and survive. Then he can reproduce. If the stupid elephant doesn't remember where the watering hole is, gets lost, whatever, doesn't follow the herd, it doesn't remember where to go, that elephant will die, cannot reproduce. Evolution at work. Bringing the truth to elephants.
Positive side, Plantinga argues that if your cognitive faculties are functioning properly, then you can know a bunch of stuff. And he has a story not just about, a lot of it's about theistic belief, but he applies it to a bunch of areas of other areas of knowledge as well. But then he also argues, and again, this is controversial, that the only way to really spell out the concept of proper function is on a theistic picture.
What? That's controversial? Oh, bravo, Liz Jackson. She's causing seeds of doubt in all these philosophical arguments.
So this would again be an epistemic consideration that is pro-theistic. I know that kind of gets complicated, but yeah.
Yeah. So maybe then it'd be good to transition to what are some considerations in favor of anti-theism?
Yeah, so just to kind of put my cards on the table, I think there's some interesting stuff to be said here, but at least in my opinion, the scales tip much more in favor of protheism, but I'll say a few that have been brought up. So one of the biggest ones people talk about is privacy. So they think, look, if God exists, God knows every thought you've ever had. God knows your beliefs, God knows your desires, God knows facts about your body and where your body's been and what you've done and all these facts about your past and who you've interacted with and
to me that's a terrible reason to not want God to exist. Privacy? Because it seems like it doesn't even bother theists, doesn't bother Christians. Cameron wanks the chicken whether he believes God's there or not, right? He doesn't care. By the way, hey, you Christians, you Muslims even, when you're doing the nasty, God's there sitting in a rocking chair. He's rocking back and forth, and he's watching every move you make. Doesn't stop you, does it? Why is that?
What terrible things you've done and all this stuff. And so some people think this is a big invasion of privacy. There's certain things that they only want certain people to know, or they maybe don't even want anyone but themselves to know. And so some have argued, Guy Kahane actually sort of pioneered the axiology of theism, and I think this is one of the big things he talks about in that paper, is that sort of God's existence, especially if God is all-knowing and omnipresent, that would violate our right to privacy. So it's kind of an interesting one.
What's his name?
Guy Kahane.
Kahane. I've never heard of Kahane.
Yeah,
leave it out there in the open.
I was actually talking to a few people at the conference about this yesterday. So yeah, I mean, of course, there's a lot to be said either way, but privacy is interesting. I mean, it's interesting to think about, well, so first, whether we even have a right to privacy at all, but also, like, why we value privacy or what the point of privacy is. And I do
especially if we're thinking about in terms of theism, where this being is perfectly loving and loves you, unconditionally.
Absolutely.
Whoa. See, now we're getting to more definitions of this God. Perfectly loving and wants to love you. Cameron, you're forgetting about the God of Calvinism. That's the one true God. He hates certain people. The wrath of God is upon certain people because they live in their sin. Is that the God you're talking about? I doubt it.
So it's like, I was just actually thinking about a couple weeks ago when my Facebook got hacked, and it felt really horrible. And I think part of the reason it felt horrible is because it felt like a privacy violation. Like they could get into all my stuff, and like there could even be like financial, like they could be stealing my money and all this stuff. But the reason that felt so horrible is because it was this person who seemed to have really bad intentions, that was like trying like to take things.
You're right, Grace. So far there has been no mention of hell yet. There's been a sort of heaven's been alluded to with seeing your loved ones again. But then again, you can see your loved ones again in hell, right? So if you know someone you deeply love is going to hell, wouldn't you want to rebel against that God so you can also go to hell, so you can see your loved one again?
That from me without my consent and all this stuff, and they didn't have my best interests in mind, so it seems like yeah, that was bad, but that doesn't seem to apply in the theistic case. God does have our best interests in mind, and in fact, some people have argued, if
again, assuming, how do you know that God has your best interests in mind?
God knows everything we're doing, and we're like aware of that. That's
how do you know that God's omniscient?
Actually, like in some ways, an important source of like accountability or something.
Right.
So you can kind of turn that argument on its head and say, no, it's actually a good thing that we don't have this like maximum privacy and these actions that we can take that we'll never be held accountable for. You know.
Are you going to be held accountable for your actions, Liz Jackson, if you go to heaven someday? And if so, what will that entail? Any suffering? Do you think God will inflict suffering on you, Liz Jackson? And if so, what does that mean with the blood of Jesus? All this is just plot hole after plot hole after plot hole.
So I want to do something kind of weird.
Okay.
So Josh Rasmussen's in the room, and I want to ask him if he has any thoughts. He's been like paying attention to this whole.
I do, because there is also a model on which
we can't hear you, so you're gonna have to like hop in the set.
Do you want me to like give him?
No.
By the way, Nathan, yesterday was it Nathan? You sent me a link to Josh Rasmussen's father. He has a YouTube channel, and I tell you, Josh's dad is a highly conservative, fundamentalist, evangelical type preacher. This explains why when I've asked Josh Rasmussen on 2 occasions, does he believe in the bodily resurrection of Jesus, he will not give me a straight answer, because I bet you anything that he does not believe it. I'm quite sure Josh Rasmussen believes in God, but he doesn't believe Jesus rose from the dead in bodily form and actually appeared to people. I'd be willing to wager real money on this, that if we hooked him up to a lie detector, the truth would be he doesn't believe it. But he can't admit this publicly, because if he did, it would cause his dad to bawl like a baby, because he is now a father who has failed. Teach a child in the way they should go, and they'll never depart from me. Well, I think Josh Rasmussen has departed from his dad's teachings. I'm pretty confident what I just said is true. But I could be wrong. Hey, Josh Rasmussen, if I'm wrong, come on to my channel right now. I know you're listening. Well, I don't know that. You're at church. But yeah, tell me I'm wrong.
Don't get on the mic. You can. You just as long as you're close
This is
enough.
all very fascinating. I think because I like to be inclusive.
No, Nathan, I think you are right, because I remember listening to some video years ago of Josh Rasmussen saying that his dad was a pastor.
Right?
Yeah.
There's also a model on which, God's mind allows indeterminacy. So maybe God could voluntarily retreat some conscious attention.
Yeah.
And, like that passage, if you...
Retreat some conscious attention. You know what Josh Rasmussen's saying here, Christians? There's an idea of God where he's not omnipresent, at least not attentive to your actions. He's giving you privacy. So all you have to do is define a God like that, and then voila, you have your privacy.
He'll draw near to you. Maybe there's some epistemic distance that you could have, and you could actually have a little bit of privacy given to you. And I think this is helpful maybe because if somebody's worried that, you can't want that God exists because it would be so bad you'd lose your privacy, well, maybe it's just a certain model of God, right? So
It's just a certain model of God. Hey, Christians, Muslims, whoever you are, don't worry. You can make God be whatever you want him to be. If you want a God of privacy, you can have a God of privacy. If you want a God who can't see the future, you can have a God who can't see. Just pick and choose the attributes you find most pleasant and create your own clay model of God. You are the potter, and God is the clay. Oh, I like that. Josh Rasmussen's God. Josh Rasmussen is the potter, and his concepts of God are the clay. You can mold it to whatever you want.
So the minimal concept of God maybe allows a range of options.
All right, get out of the set, Josh.
I'm out of here.
No, that's good.
Range of options.
Well, one reason I like that
Yeah, choosing a definition of God is like picking food out of a buffet.
is because I think in general, a lot of this debate is going to depend on your concept of God, right?
Yeah.
And one thing I've pushed is like, look, if God exists, then there's this afterlife, and there's all this pro-theistic stuff in the afterlife, whether that's just in general or even like epistemic stuff, like we can ask God any question. That's super cool.
Oh, Camille, remind me to show that comment that you sent me. I'm going to show that after this.
Right, but there's still this inference to be made from God's existence to the afterlife. And so you need to be clear what you mean by God, what all you're building into that.
Okay, we're on 20 minutes, 57 seconds. You need to be clear what you mean by God. 20 minutes later, she says this. You need to be clear on what you mean by God. Well, that has not been clear throughout this whole thing. A God could exist and heaven not. A God could exist and hell not. A God could exist and desires evil. A God could exist and doesn't care about justice. A God could exist and just wants us ant people to run around and hurt each other, and he's amused by it. My goodness.
An afterlife isn't strictly inconsistent with atheism. I mean, it might be weird, right? But so I think Josh is totally right that getting clear on the concept of God is going to have a lot of implications for whether these considerations actually end up holding water.
Yeah, that's good. So privacy was one. Let's talk about another one. But before we do that, I was just thinking that when Josh came in the set, this is like the CC team.
Oh, yeah.
Like the three of us are.
Okay, so remember when we were talking about the problem of evil earlier,
Yep.
and then we said, if you suffer, you're compensated for that, and maybe if you suffer -10, God gives you +20. So it's like maybe you're even overcompensated. Some people have argued that this actually renders morality incoherent. So I could go around and torture people because if I torture you and you get -1,000, then God gives you +2,000 in the afterlife, right? So I'm actually doing you a favor by torturing you when you sort of look at the whole timeline, the grid
That's a good point.
scheme of things. And that seems totally incoherent. Torturing people's wrong, punching people in the face is wrong.
Oh, that seems totally incoherent. I'm thinking of the Job story right now. Wasn't Job rewarded for his faithfulness in the end? And didn't God's basically, I'm going to say this strongly, God caused torture upon Job because he told Satan to do whatever he wanted, just not kill him. To me, an all-powerful, all-knowing God, when he allows something, it's the same thing as causing it.
We can't just go around and do whatever we want because God's going to compensate people later. So
my initial thought to that is, and I haven't been like giving my own assessment of things so far, but my initial assessment of that is it seems to assume something like consequentialism about what we should do, because you get all these good positive benefits, and that's going to guide us in what we should do morally. Yeah, and even if you give consequences some kind of moral weight, this would have to give them like a very significant amount of moral weight so that could justify things that are very clearly intuitively morally wrong. Yeah. Is that kind of the response that you would give to? That's definitely one good response. I mean, I also think too, you could just say, we don't know exactly how compensation is going to work. Okay. Even if there's some kind of justice, it's just, we shouldn't just bank on like, oh, they're going to be compensated so I can do whatever I want, know? So I think there's at least some room to say, well, I'm not 100% sure, and that's taking a pretty big risk to like go and torture someone. So, let's slow down a little bit here. So yeah, I think in that case, again, you would be sort of challenging what theism implies, whether it's like, some kind of consequentialism, or that like they're all definitely, I have credence one, that they're all compensated in this way. So right, yeah. Okay. So then what about another consideration? Did you say that there was another one? Yeah, there's probably a lot. I'm kind of going off the top of my head. Yeah, let's just
Yeah, I mentioned a whole bunch. If you came late, I mentioned a whole bunch of reasons why one should not want God to exist. And again, I didn't define God because these guys didn't either, so I can just make up stuff. And one of them is you don't have to cry out to God and try to figure out what his will. Your cognitive dissonance is at the lowest a human can have, as far as these ideas of ontology, the real meaning of life. Why are we here? You can just basically say, I don't know to a lot of these things, or just say, hey, we're just materialists. You don't have to worry about purpose, and you don't have to worry about God's will. You don't have to cry, ask these questions, why did God allow this? No, it all goes away. That alone is probably the biggest reason to desire for a God to not exist. Because you will suffer less when you can see the world the way it is. When you realize that this whole idea of justice is up to us, not God. That's better, yeah?
Let's do one more.
Okay, so one more. So some people think if God exists and God has total and exhaustive foreknowledge of the future, this compromises or even takes away our free will.
Oh.
So the thought...
No, Liz, you can't talk about this. Most Christians don't understand this.
Would be, look, if you're going to eat cereal for breakfast tomorrow and you can freely do that, maybe we think initially, but God knows, God even like maybe has credence one, that you're going to eat cereal for breakfast tomorrow, then it doesn't seem like you could choose to eat it or not eat it. It seems like there's some kind of fatalist thing going on here where you have to eat cereal for breakfast. There's not really an alternative possibility there. So one potential anti-theistic consideration is if there's a God that has full foreknowledge of the future, that might compromise our free will.
Yeah, I love that she just admits that. The thing is, I lean towards determinism. Sure, there's some randomness in the world. But the thing is, there's a huge problem when you attach a God to determinism, because then basically it's God's fault that we exist. Because he could have chosen, if you believe God's free, he could have chosen not to create us. This is a huge problem. Every person who, if you believe in their concept of God with hell, every person who goes to hell, it's God's fault, because he could have chosen not to create anything at all. Every time there's a murder, a rape, God's fault, because he could have chosen not to create anything at all. But he did create, knowing what would happen. If the future is a set object, what God knows to happen will happen, otherwise he knew wrong. Christians like Liz Jackson understands this. But most Christians don't. Well, he didn't force us. It has nothing to do with coercion. It has to do with God setting up existence the way it is, that those things would happen. So this is why there's Molinists. This is why there's open theists, to get around this problem, because they realize this is a problem. So isn't that a good reason not to believe in that God? A God that sees all future events perfectly with certainty? It ends up being fatalism. Okay, I think that's enough of this. I wanted to show... Camille sent this to me the other day. This has to do with my debate with Trent Horn, actually, in a way. Because my strategy with Trent Horn was to show that we're the same, to agree with Trent Horn in as many things as I could, to agree with other Christians on as many things as I could. And the other day, Bart Ehrman was on with Inspiring Philosophy. And this is a comment that Camille saw and sent to me. After watching this video, I am now in a hole of doubt. I'm seriously flabbergasted and in confusion now. IP saying sternly that the Book of Revelations, singular actually, Book of Revelation, is about the past and not the future, and hearing Bart talk and IP in agreement. Well, I'm now questioning a lot of things. I was not expecting this to have happened. People claiming that followers of Christ were so disillusioned when Romans destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD and that Christ never came back. Does this mean that honestly Christ didn't fulfill what he said? Why would Christ tell them that in their lifetime they would see him return? Christ never said, I'll be back in 2,000 years. Peace. This is very dangerous. And I think a great strategy to bring up these things is when Christians and atheists agree on so much, it does cause followers of Christ to doubt. To this gentleman, what's his name? Master Bobby. It's okay to doubt. It's okay to let it all go. You can. You'll be just fine. In a lot of ways, believing you should not want God to exist because you can actually enjoy life here on planet Earth better. Because life becomes finite. It becomes something, and when something is finite, it goes up in value. So life goes up in value. Your experiences go up in value. Your desire for justice goes up in value because you're not relying on a God to do it for you in the end. Your cognitive dissonance will go down, guarantee it. You'll be able to breathe. You'll worry less. You'll have fewer bad dreams, especially if you're the type of theist who believes in demons and angels. You can actually enjoy horror movies. I watch horror movies and I laugh. I mean, it's fun. But for some Christians, they go in and they watch horror movies and they think it's a documentary. My goodness.
Hey, Doug.
Yes. I let you on for one reason.
Yeah. Why?
You said Habermas is mad at me?
Well, he is very unhappy with you, from what I understand, to the point that he's turning down other invitations. But listen,
what? He's mad at? He's turning down other invitations? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, I don't want to say everything. Basically, from what I understand is because of your experience, he's more cautious to engage in high-profile discussions. And he considers what you have done to be harassment, as far as I am aware.
What have I done?
Well, he says you've been a real pain. I'm not going to go into that anymore. But look.
No. If he says I'm a real pain, what do you think he means by that? What have I done?
He feels like your fan base has harassed him.
Okay, do I control my fan base?
Okay, what do you want from me? Okay, like
You talk to him. You say, "Does PineCreek control his fans?"
I'm not gonna do that. But look,
He has a public email.
look. Can I just say this? That like, I mean, you've ruined maybe future great interactions with Habermas. That's all I'm gonna
Oh,
say.
that's no big loss.
Yeah, it is a big loss.
No, it is not.
He was-
Habermas
he was-
is
he
not
was-
a
look,
big
listen,
loss. I mean,
he was apparently supposed to debate like huge names, and because of you, he's not going to do that. So like,
yes,
shame on you. You're a disgusting individual.
that's funny actually.
No, it's not funny at all. I mean,
No, if
not
he's
funny at
that
all.
weak-kneed, if he has no
it's not
spine.
funny at all because you encourage people to harass him, and that's not funny at all.
Oh,
But-
get off your high horse,
Listen,
Habermas.
listen.
You can put a block feature on your email. Come on.
No, but like, I mean, you didn't treat him like he was expecting an amicable discourse, and you didn't do it. But that's fine. I'm not here for that. But look,
I was like a baby to him.
okay, come on. Like, let's be clear. But Doug, I have a question. Why are you not letting me in lately? Why are you so against me?
Because I've talked.
Why?
There's no need to talk to you.
Why?
Why? Because I know everything already
You don't know anything like
about you and what you
Can
could
I-
say. Tell me
can I-
something I don't know.
Sure, but can I ask you something without you like being evasive about it? Like,
No.
without
No.
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 Okay, so you're gonna like not let me ask questions.
No. The only reason I told you, the only reason why I let you in is because I wanted to know about this Habermas thing, and
Well, I told you that-
and you brought great joy to my life.
No, it's not joyful.
To
at all.
think a YouTuber named PineCreek has caused him to stop debating, I don't believe you.
Well,
Actually,
he hasn't stopped debating, but he's not accepting like major invitations because of. I mean, as far as he said, he thought that you were big pain and your fan base harassed him. But anyways, you're not like gonna let me ask you questions.
you can do it in the live stream chat. I'd rather have other people on.
Okay, well, I mean, you're running away, but
Yeah. Okay. Take care.
all right, God bless.
Science bless. That's hilarious if that's true. I don't know if it's true or not. You guys think that's true? Now, Habermas has refused to debate people now because of the harassment started by PineCreek's fan base. I told one person who I believe, if memory serves, I asked Christians to email Habermas, not atheists. I asked Christians to email because Habermas, I got the impression, wouldn't talk to atheists. So I asked Christians to email. And I think I only asked one. Maybe two. I don't know. Hey, Camille.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, you're loud and clear.
Yeah, I was just wondering. I think a lot of atheists find the idea that if let's say a mass murderer repents just before he dies, and he goes to heaven, like a lot of atheists find it objectionable.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering what motivates that feeling. Like, is it just a desire for retribution? Like, just because the person caused suffering, he deserves to suffer in return? Because I'm actually thinking that I might disagree. I might be actually fine with the idea that, let's say, a mass murderer or a child rapist who repents goes to
It's not so
heaven.
much about the retribution, it's about the reward. Like, I think it goes against our intuitions of justice that murderers, serial rapists get rewarded,
Okay.
right? And that's what heaven is. It's a reward.
Sure. Yeah, that might complicate things. If the options would be hell or annihilation, would you still think it's problematic that someone who repents escapes hell?
Well, I wouldn't wish hell upon anyone. Eternal conscious torment. Even a serial rapist, maybe they should get as many years as they put into it. But so your question is, if there were no hell?
Yeah. Let's just say the religion is exactly the same, but it's just hell or annihilation. Like, would you still think it's somehow problematic that you can be a murderer, and as long as you repent before you die, you escape hell and you're just annihilated?
No, I would say that it's less problematic because that's basically what I believe now. Like
Okay.
I believe that when we die there. That's it.
Cool. Do you think it would be unfair if, because like, you know, like we are atheists, right? So we don't think there is an ultimate judge.
Right.
But if it was the case that there is an all-loving God, do you think that would be problematic? That there is this loophole that allows you to escape punishment, essentially?
Yeah, I do
Would it
think
be
so.
inconsistent?
Yeah.
Because I'm actually thinking, I am getting to a position where I don't have a problem with that, with the idea that you can escape hell through.
Well, there's a problem.
repentance, right?
There is a problem with the definition of God. Like, if you believe God is all just, and justice means that people get what's due to them, except there's a loophole, and there's this thing called mercy. Mercy is the opposite of justice. It's withholding justice. Well, it's not the opposite, but it's the withholding of justice. Then I think you can say that this God's contradictory.
And do you think that justice, like, what's the basis of justice there? Is it just retribution?
Well, it would have to be some type of, whether you view it as punishment or discipline. Yeah, I think.
Because I'm getting to a position where I actually don't think it's problematic, like the idea that you escape hell by repenting, and it's just it has to do with what's the function of punishment. Like, why do we actually punish people? And I think it's protection. So you protect other people from them, right? You look someone up so that he's not able to go on committing crimes, let's say. Then it's prevention, so you prevent them from doing it in the future. It's deterrence, so you know, if people know that they will be locked up given they commit certain crimes, it's less likely they will do it. And then it's rehabilitation, so you actually lock people up so that you can facilitate some kind of rehabilitation.
Yeah,
like
and I think
counseling.
Catholics and a lot of other Christians do believe that purgatory is a type of rehabilitation.
I think I would like it, if Christianity is true, then I would do repentance as rehabilitation, because I think on the Christian worldview, or at least in most theologies, God actually knows if you are being serious. So only people who genuinely go through like a moral reform count as people who repented. If you just pretend that you repent, then God knows, right? And I'm just wondering,
but
if
that's
it's fair.
That
to
excludes
still punish those kinds of people.
That excludes deathbed conversions, though, because if you do a sincere repentance, can you just repent and die? Because repentance means turning away, turning and going the opposite direction. But you don't even have the opportunity to do that because you're dead. So it just becomes words at that point, right?
Well, that's a question. I think you can still. I can imagine someone being just a horrible person and then going through a genuine reform of character shortly before they die. That's fine, right? I don't see that as problematic. Maybe like, imagine that you are a murderer and then you get terminal cancer. I think the fact that you are about to die might make you more likely to go through a genuine moral reform, because you, for example, realize that you only have.
But what I'm saying is, you can't go through a sincere moral reform without living and being tempted to do the same things you were doing previously. So it's very easy for a rapist to feel really guilty and feel sincerely sorry for what they've done if they know they're going to die in 3 days. Because the real test would be cure them, put them back in society, and see if they still rape. Then that's the real test of whether they've been reformed.
Well, I think that's more like epistemological, right? Like, that's how you know they are being serious. So it makes it more like, it doesn't make it more likely that they actually went through a genuine reform. It's more evidence that they did for the outsider, right?
Yeah. So your bottom summary line here is you're okay with deathbed conversions, true repentance, because you're basically against the whole idea of punishment in hell to begin with. Retribution in here on earth, so therefore you would have to be against it in the afterlife. But to me, it still misses the whole idea. Like, if the general Christian conception, and even Muslim, I think, well, no, Christian, is that it's not so much about the punishment. It's you can say a few words, feel sincerely remorse, and get rewarded. Like your sins are covered. That's a problem.
Yeah, well, it depends on whether you think of heaven as a reward or just a default destination, you know? Because if you think of it as a default, so everyone goes to heaven except for people who go to hell, then that becomes less problematic. It depends how you frame it, right?
Yeah.
It would be like, imagine if people who go to prison and they go through moral rehabilitation, like imagine that then they would be released, right? Like they would get pardoned, like some of the years would get just stricken off the record. Would you frame it as a reward that they get to rejoin society?
Yeah, I think
as
I
opposed
would.
to staying in prison.
Yeah.
Do you think that would be a reward?
Yeah, I think I
So
would view that
would
as a
you-
reward.
So would you actually keep a person still imprisoned even though they went through the reform? Because I would probably see that as the goal of the process of the
usually
punishment.
usually that's in the United States. That's not how it works. Like whether you're reformed or
Sure.
not, that's irrelevant. You're sentenced to 20 years. You do 20 years.
And do you think that's a good system?
Do I think it's a good system? I don't know. I mean, it does act as a deterrent, as you said earlier.
Yeah, I think it's a really weird system where you get sentenced to a fixed number of years, where your like personal freedom is basically taken away, and you are automatically released after that period of time. And it absolutely doesn't matter what happens with you. Like, let's say that you are sentenced to 10 years, and everyone realizes that the 10 years is going to be up tomorrow, but you are just a horrible mess. As soon as they let you go, you're gonna be in trouble. I think that happens all the time, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
But no, like no, that's just how the system works, right? So it's always been really strange, this idea that okay, there's a fixed period of time, and we don't really care about the kind of well-being and the kind of mental state that the person is in, and as soon as that like arbitrary period of time is off, then they are released, right? I think ideally the system would be better, such that when a person goes through like a rehabilitation, then they are released.
Part of it is
of
just
course.
part of it.
It's of course very difficult to determine that actually happens.
Yeah,
right?
that's the thing. People can
but-
fool people.
Yeah, but God doesn't have that problem. God knows for sure if He exists, right? So it would be like a perfect committee who can't be wrong about whether the criminal actually went through genuine rehabilitation. So yeah, like the bottom line is, I view retributive justice as basically barbaric. I think the ultimate goal of punishment is rehabilitation, and if Christianity is true, then repentance counts as genuine rehabilitation, and only
Do you think
genuine rehabilitation counts as repentance.
Like
So if you're not being
I
serious-
truly believe that some people are incapable of rehabilitation.
Okay, that's too bad for them.
Yeah.
That's a problem for the theology that those people exist, right?
Yeah.
But everyone else is fine. The only thing that I might have where like my line of reasoning might be off is deterrence, basically.
The what?
Because deterrence.
Deterrence. Okay.
Yeah, because it could be the case that if we live in a society where the expectation is that you get rehabilitated and you can reintegrate into society, that could lower deterrence massively, right? So people would be more willing to commit crimes because they would think that the worst thing that it could happen to them is they will get helped, basically, to become better people.
Yeah.
But I might have like a counter objection, and that's you can't actually choose whether you feel sorry or not. Like, at least I can't, right? Like, if I do something bad, then I feel sorry and I can turn it off, and I can just like flip a switch in my head and feel sorry for something that I don't actually feel sorry for. Just
Yeah.
like you can't choose.
Yeah, I agree with
what
that.
to believe.
But
Yeah,
we can put
so-
ourselves in positions that we become more sorry Like, let's say you don't feel sorry for gays, the plight of the homosexual. You can put yourself, like, let's say you could put yourself in their shoes or walk with them for a month in their daily life and see the things they go through, and you become more empathetic to their plight.
Okay, can you actually you can choose that, right? But do you actually have like a more control over that choice than you do about whether you feel sorry or not?
Yeah, no, I'm saying you do have more choice to put yourself in a position to experience what they experience.
Yeah, but I mean, you have that choice, but how much control you have over whether you're going to make that choice in the first place or not, right?
Oh yeah,
That's always the problem.
yeah.
It's like I can't choose to believe, but I can like in God, let's say, but I can imagine putting myself in situations where it's going to be more likely that I will believe. Like I can, for example, start going to a Pentecostal church, which is here in Prague, and maybe if I go there for like months, and also my life gets shitty, which is going to happen in like 3 weeks when my second daughter is born, I'm sure, then maybe I'll actually become convinced that like Jesus was raised, right? But how much control I have about making this when it comes to making the decision to start going to that church? Yeah, I could do it, but I'm probably not going.
This is the whole determinism, free will thing, and I think that since we don't know what causes will determine what effects. Since we're not omniscient, we just have to live our life like we're free. But yeah, I got 3 people who want to jump in. What we're talking about seems to.
I hope that atheists are not going to be mad, because I don't have that big of a problem with that with conversions. Like I don't think it's like a massive problem for the religion. It's not the gotcha that people think that it is.
But it's because of your idea of hell's not fair, right? Or even annihilationism.
It's just a rejection of retributive justice.
Yeah.
Like I don't think you should harm people because they harm people. That's just like a.
But I'm talking more about the reward aspect, like Streets of Gold. Like if it's like.
Yeah. Like if the world was such that you can either be in prison or Streets of Gold, then that would complicate things.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay,
Anyhow,
I'm going to.
Maybe.
By the way, are you gonna do something with Erman?
No.
Like promotion or something?
I decided not to.
No. Okay, I think it's a good decision.
Here's why. I actually think. Yeah, I'm going to say it. I actually think there's nothing new going to come out of the debate with Ehrman and Lacona. It's going to be the rehash, just longer, of things that we've known for years. I'm kind of upset that they put it behind a paywall.
Is that going to go to charity, or are you just going to pocket it?
I have no idea.
Because I know Ehrman is just doing a lot of charity work.
Yeah, I know there's expenses involved, and so maybe what they ought to do is put it behind a paywall for maybe a month and then make it free to everyone. But that's not the case. They're making it behind a paywall. So I don't even know if I can. I bet you anything I'll have pushback if I even try to do a fair use critique on it.
Exactly. This is what I was thinking, and I don't know how to approach it. I was thinking about writing an email to Ehrman or someone who manages it. Because if we, the day after it happens, if we go through the material, even if we critique it, then basically we are just publishing it, and it's going to be unfair to everyone who paid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like this is the case where free use doesn't really solve anything, because even if you provide your own commentary, you are still basically making it public, right? Which is.
Yeah.
The point of the paywall, it's not supposed to be out for the people who didn't pay. I'm kind of hoping there's going to be something new, just because it's so long, right? Like you can't. I agree that these debates, like the conversation tree, is always the same. It's just in 7 hours you have to go deeper in the conversational tree than you go when you have like 2 hours or an hour and a half, right? So I think there's going to be probably something good.
If you were to predict, do you think Ehrman or Lacona will say anything you haven't heard or thought of before?
I think it would be interesting to see if Lacona is going to maybe bring up some different kinds of apologetics that he didn't do, because it could be the case that like he will see that the minimal facts are not working, and when you are 6 hours in, you will he will be tired, and like his brain will stop working, and then maybe he'll start like coming up with some unusual stuff, right? Like I wouldn't be, for example, surprised if he started arguing more in line of McGrew's, just because
Yeah.
the situation.
But it's
Yeah,
not
and
it's not
it
7 hours. I mean, they're making this sound like an all-day event, but there's going to be like an hour for lunch break, I bet. There's going to be breaks through the whole thing. He's going to be more refreshed than, let's say, a Nathan from Digital Gnosis who goes like 8 hours, or when you're 8 hours straight or whatever. No, he's It's going to be it's basically be two debates. Most debates are 2.5 hours long. It's going to be basically two debates with like an hour break in between. And this whole all-day event, it's no.
Yeah, I think it might actually change status quo. I would be even curious if Ehrman has some new material, because he basically repeats like a lot of the same talking points in every debate, and he might also run out of them. So it will be interesting.
Everybody's going to hate me now for saying what I just said. Derek, Apologia, IP's even promoting it. I'm basically saying nothing's new going to happen.
I actually think you made I think you made the right decision. To be
because
honest.
Why? Why do you think I made the right decision?
Well, because you didn't. Yeah, because there's money involved, basically.
Oh, yeah.
So it would be a little bit hypocritical for you to then to criticize people for selling out,
Yeah.
right? Even if it's not comparable. Like if you said yes, you wouldn't become Frank Turek or like J. Warner Wallace or Ray Strobo, who are worth like millions probably, right? But still, it's like it's either a hobby or you're just doing it for money. And I don't really. It's really strange. But if someone gave me an opportunity to talk to Bart Ehrman for 30 minutes, I don't even know like what I would ask him. Right?
Exactly.
Like, I read his books. I would probably just ask him about like what he does in his free time when he's not a scholar.
Like I've had people say, Doug, why don't you interview Bart Ehrman? About what? Like I basically know everything he believes, not in the great detail that he does, of course, but the stuff that matters, like, yeah, it's. But anyhow, I might do an hour free for all. So stick around if you want to come back.
Sure.
Okay. Who's here first? I don't know. I'm gonna go with. I'll go with Danny and just keep it short, and then I'll go to Ryan and Aaron.
Is my camera not working?
No, it isn't.
Okay, 1 second. I can fix that in a second. Here, you throw the second person in. I'm about to leave and come back, unless I think I can do that really quickly.
Well, just talk.
Okay. Well, I'm having Liz Jackson. She's coming over to my class, and she's going to talk about faith with my students because we're doing philosophy of religion right now. But okay. I want to know the verdict. What was the verdict about whether, for you, after watching that video, whether we should want God to exist?
My main punchline was they never defined God. And then they even talked about God, like how to define God 20 minutes in. And I bet you there are people. Apology is in the live stream chat, and I just said something about him. And so I think it was a kind of a waste of time, that video, and I kind of regret even going over it.
I think that's a very trivial answer to it. I only want the sort of God that doesn't conflict with my desires and my hopes and dreams, and that's it.
That's what I said in the live stream. That people construct the God that they desire to help them through the day, to help them deal with the crap in their lives, and that's the God they want to believe in, and that's it.
Yeah, for the last couple months, I've actually, because Aaron Ra came out, he started trolling the Christians and came out like as a Satanist, and then I kind of realized that if you construe the Old Testament God and as one that promotes genocide and killing babies and flooding there's like a sense in which being a Satanist is like being against those sort of things, right? Like, so I don't know, like that's to say that a lot of the way we model the divine or the other is in terms of like whether it's good or bad, just in terms of what we want the world to be like. So I don't really think there's anything special to the question.
Well, if Aaron Ra is trolling Christians saying that he's a Satanist, if Aaron Ra knows his Old Testament, he'll know that he's basically admitting to be a messenger of God. Satan is God's messenger in the Old Testament. He does what God wants him to do, starting from in the Garden of Eden to how he treated Job.
Oh yeah. The idea is that he's instrumental, right?
And this Christian idea that Satan is bad. No, Satan is God's right-hand man in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I was talking to Rebecca yesterday or the day before, and she was giving this theodicy that the reason why there's evil in the world is because of Satan. And but it seems like if given those omni properties, like God wanted Satan to, deceive and cause the fall. Like the fall was like instrumental for God to like be the redeeming quality of the world or something like that. So I don't see how, but anyway.
Without Satan, you wouldn't have Jesus.
Right. Yeah, that's what I meant. But
yeah. Anyhow,
we can do the same conclusion, but I know you have a line behind you, so
maybe ask Liz if she would ever come on my channel when you talk.
Oh, you want me to ask her? Because we've been on. Okay, I will ask her.
Because I think she's dangerous for Christians. Because she's basically giving what I think most Christians who follow Capturing Christianity's channel license to say you're rational to be a Mormon, you're rational to be a Hindu. It's Liz Jackson stirs up this idea of rationality to all faiths, as long as they have this desire or they have one or two. I feel Vishnu in me or whatever. Like I
see what you're saying. I'll ask her. I'll talk to her on Tuesday, so then I'll let you know.
Yeah, we'll see if she even knows me. Okay, take care.
See ya. Bye.
Hey, Ron.
What's up, Doug?
How are you doing?
I'm good. Happy Sunday.
Yeah, happy Sunday. A lot of people are watching March Madness right now, I bet.
Oh yeah, sports ball. Are you not into that?
Well, yeah, this year I am. Arizona's number one.
But you're a science man. I mean, you're not supposed to be into sports ball too, right?
Hey, I was never a science nerd.
I mean, you sacrificed your testes for it, right? I think I've heard the sacrifices you've made for it. So.
Yeah, the sacrifices I made for science, which led me to in vitro fertilization, which led Trent Horn to not like me, which led to a debate. Oh, the butterfly effect.
Well, see, if you could just go back and change one of those things, maybe it wouldn't be holding so many heavy metals. Listening to heavy metal would be better.
I kind of like that. I sacrificed my testes for science. How many of you flag-waving phony naturalists have done that?
Hey, so I wanted to voice my disappointment in you that the video that you started the stream with. You're breaking up, Aaron. Are you there?
Well, what? Okay, what do you want to voice?
Well, and maybe I should just let you clarify, but being quickly judgmental is kind of our heritage, and I just wanted to tap back into that. So I wanted to. I've heard you say before, like if God could be proven to you, that you would believe and you would worship.
I've never said.
Is that right?
I've never said that.
Okay,
well,
I'm almost twisting your words in my memory.
I almost never use the word prove.
So, if you were convinced that God existed,
okay,
what would your reaction be?
Which God are we talking about that I'm convinced about?
Yahweh, the one we thought was real. I've heard enough of you that I think that we believed in the
if
same,
I became
same
convinced
of Yahweh.
If I became convinced that the God of the Old Testament was real.
Yeah, Jesus drowning babies was a thing, and that guy's real.
I would not.
And he wants a relationship with you.
Yeah, I would say, get ye behind me, Yahweh.
Are you saying that you have the stones to say that?
Well, the mercury and cadmium took care of those my stones, but I would, yeah.
See, you are a man of the world. So I've often like, cause I've heard I've gone, I've told you that I listen to you when I go to bed at night. You lull me into a sense of
So we've been in bed together.
non-corporally, yeah.
But it's okay because I don't have testes, so.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not for procreation, obviously.
Yeah.
So, so I wonder though if that desire for self-preservation would win out if you really.
Oh no,
if
no.
You think that your altruistic your morality would override your sense of self-preservation if there was a God. Of course, you can't fool him, right? But
if I became convinced that the Yahweh of the Old Testament existed, and if I publicly denounced this, I believe it exists, but I'm not going to worship you, and here's why.
Right.
I would set up, I would have GoPro cameras around me all my whole life, and I would document for other Christians the way God's going to cause me to suffer, if he does cause me to suffer.
You would turn your life into a Truman Show of suffering.
It would be a reality show where yeah, there he is. And
that's going to be you, Doug. It's going to be free PineCreek.
Yeah, free PineCreek. And I would encourage other Christians to watch this and they too rebel. And Yahweh can't cause everyone to suffer.
I love how you're trying to co-opt Satan's coup. You're just you're like, get behind me, Satan.
Yeah.
I think that video would have been much more interesting if they would have said, if they would have asked atheists, why don't you want my God to exist? I think that's much more interesting because then they would get the answers that aren't just because I like my sin, which is what they think. Which is what I hear a lot of times is that, oh, you just love your rebellion. But
Christians that follow Capturing Christianity's channel, they sin all the time. Whether they believe in this God or not, it seems it has no bearing on their sin life.
Oh, of course. But remember, like you were saying earlier, like about you were talking with Camille, which, by the way, I think that I prefer whatever model of justice system that Camille is apt to because of his accent. Because that's just like the socialist in me is like whatever his accent is leading us to, let's do it. But the like the concept of justice is completely lost when the goalpost becomes whatever God prefers, right? So like whatever like your deity prefers is the goalpost that you're working towards to consider something just. You and I have a different concept of justice because we left that.
Yeah.
So, but it goes back to the same, whether it's justice or goodness, and it's nothing about like it was eye-opening to me when I realized that the whole story that we came from, the worldview that we came from, was not about. It was just about obedience.
Yeah.
All of it comes back to obedience. So it doesn't matter if you were a rapist, and then you can.
Why did you want to obey God when you were a Christian? You're looking up and to the left.
What does that mean?
That means I've tapped into the creative part of your brain on the right side.
I wanted to be obedient.
Okay, but why?
I believe that was what was expected of me. I believed that I was created, and it always felt kind of like whenever I would think, like, man, doesn't God sound like kind of selfish in a way? like he really wants this worship, and he really wants this, like thirsty, for people's attention.
Let me change my question. And you will not look up to the left. You're going to keep your eyes on the camera, and you're going to answer quickly. When you were a Christian, what did you believe would happen if you were disobedient?
Go to hell.
There you go.
And honestly, so I think I wanted to obey for those reasons. Like I remember asking the question of friends of mine, like, if you knew that you wouldn't go to heaven, would you still obey? And I wanted to be, like I would say, yes, I sure would, because, but then it does come down to carrots and sticks.
Why do you
I
think
think
you
that
what you said that even if there was no heaven, you'd still want to obey God, and the reason is?
because I loved God,
Okay, why did you love God?
because I was convinced that it was like the most fulfilling thing that I could do.
Right. You
Like
loved
it
God
was
because of what God could do for you, fulfill
not just
you.
not just what he could do for me, but like it was my purpose in life. Like experiencing life to the fullest meant tapping into the source.
Right, but that whole that's all about you. What?
But it is all, yes,
Yeah,
but you're right. It's like,
yeah,
what could that do for me? It could make me feel like a fuller, richer experience.
yep.
But what you said about like, would you want God to exist? I mean, honestly, like, would I want the worst villain who went out? And this is why I think that there's not a chance for me ever going back, because I now see that character as the worst villain in fiction. I can't imagine a worse like villain than the Yahweh that I believed in, and so in order for me to go back, I have to now square that he's actually not a villain. He is the ultimate good guy again. And I think once you see it this way, I just don't know how it would ever happen. But my brother's Calvinist, and he'll apparently I don't really have a choice.
Yeah, well, there you go.
If I
But
start thinking he's good after all.
maybe Yahweh is sort of like the Joker, and we're Batman, and like we need each other to complete us.
Ooh, so it's just a spiral of existentialism.
I don't want to kill Yahweh. He
So
completes me.
do you? I think what you said about like,
Last thing, then I gotta let other people in.
yeah, so the most useful thing that I have found leaving Christianity is holding everything open-handed, including everything that I would learn and could learn and have ever learned, just holding it all open-handed and letting go of preference, letting go of desire. And so like suffering comes from your desire, and holding on to desire more tightly than you should. And so wanting God to exist in the first place is suffering. So
You sound very Buddhist or very Hindu. I don't know what. Something like that. Anyhow,
all right,
take
later,
care.
Doug.
You play poker? You should. That's your purpose in life. Ryan.
Hey,
Hey.
so I'll try to be quick. I've only seen Liz Jackson talk about two things, Pascal's wager and the axiology of Christianity just now.
Okay.
In both times, I've always walked away feeling like, so what? Like, so what if I could concede everything she's ever said on these 2 points, and I still wouldn't be a theist. I would just be an atheist who wants God to exist. So why does that matter? Like, this seems like kind of a boring thing to talk about. But
She has a PhD in philosophy, and her job is this stuff. So she's just trying to come up with new and innovative ways to talk about these things, to maybe even defend Christianity, help Christians not feel stupid for what they believe, give
it's just
practical
weird
reasons.
because I feel like she hasn't defended Christianity. At best, she's defended theism, but I don't even think she's defended theism very much. It seems like she's just said that you should want God to exist.
Yeah.
That's not a defense. Like, I can concede the whole thing and just be an atheist who wants God to exist.
What Aaron said earlier, if Liz Jackson was here right now and asked, would you want the Yahweh of the Old Testament to exist? Yes or no? Lean yes, lean no. I wonder what she would say.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I bet she'd say yes because she thinks that that's all loving, all good, you know. And it's like, sure, if God's good, I want him to exist too. But
Drowning the
I,
planets, all loving, all good.
I suppose she's probably already thought of that and has an answer for that.
Well, she probably rejects that. She probably thinks that never happened in history, but
Yeah,
my guess is she'll just reject the things she feels is bad, and she'll accept the things that she feels is good, and she's created God in her own image.
Yeah, I guess I don't really know a whole lot about what her specific beliefs are. If she believes that like God did order like the genocide of other religious groups in the past, but I don't know. But I've felt the same way about her Pascal's wager thing. Like nowhere in her paper does she mention that you should be a theist or that you should be a Christian. She just says that you should believe whatever has the highest value or expected value, which could be anything because she never talks about it.
Yeah.
So every time she talks, I just walk away thinking like, so what? There's no action items.
But you're not a Christian, right? You're not a theist.
Correct.
Yeah, and you're not her target audience. Her target,
I guess so, but
target audience are theists who might be doubting, and she wants to reassure them.
But she goes on all these apologetics channels, which is supposed to be about defending Christianity.
Yeah, but defending Christianity is hard. It's tough. So instead, they defend theism first.
Yeah, but she doesn't even do that, in my opinion. Like, that's just why it seems to boggle my mind. But anyway, that's pretty much all I wanted to say about that.
So what you're saying is Liz Jackson's useless. Is that what you're saying, Ryan?
I haven't seen a good use.
Useless in her arguments. Okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen her like a big purpose in her arguments. I think she's removed the teeth from Pascal's wager because she's taken out the conclusion. Her only conclusion is that we should do whatever maximizes utility. She's also can grant that.
She's also admitted with Pascal's wager that if me, an atheist, truly believes that only atheists go to heaven if there's a heaven, because a God would reward rational thinking and reward those who reject all the religions of the world. If I truly believe that, then I'm rational to hold that belief and remain an atheist, encourage other people to become atheists.
Right. I think most people just get a boost on whatever belief they currently have, whether they're an atheist, whether they're a Mormon, whether they're a Muslim, doesn't matter. Kind of like what you said. Yeah, everyone. She gives rationality away to everyone.
Yeah. You get rationality. You get rationality. Okay, take care, Ryan.
Yep. All right. See you.
Okay, this person I do not know, so I'll hit the mute button. Take off that. Hey, Stop the Op, how are you? I'm doing well.
Loud and clear?
Yes, you are loud and clear. What's up?
Good, man. Oh, nothing much, man. I was actually, I've been subscribed to your channel for a little bit, I guess. I was scrolling through my subscriptions, and I seen the title, Do We Need God? Or I was like, wait, what? What is this guy talking about here? So I get on here, and you're talking about you could just live a better life without God. And going on and on about how much better life is. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this guy drank the Kool-Aid just like the Christians have. I was like, what kind of cult are we even talking about here? And then it turns out it's not. It's just they're saying that, so I figured I'd tap in here real quick and talk about the nature of God really quick with you and see what you mean by God. I heard you talking about divine forethought a little bit. But what else when you're defining God? What do you mean? What's the nature of God you're talking about?
That's a very tough question for me to answer because I was asking the exact same thing of the video I was critiquing just an hour ago. They wouldn't define it for me.
I caught a little bit. Yeah, I caught a little bit of that.
So I can define God the way a lot of Christians do. But even Christians, there's a huge diversity on who God is. But the typical thing is God is all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving, all-good, creator God. That's the basics, but that could explain the God of Islam as well as the God of Christianity, and maybe even some gods of Hinduism. So I don't know.
So we're not necessarily talking about an incarnate of God. We're necessarily kind of stepping back and talking about just going by what you said, an all-knowing God, we'll say an all-loving God. I don't know if you said that. Maybe a creator God, which actually technically some people look at that like the demiurge. So that can be that's kind of a spaghetti bowl of spaghetti you got there too, as far as defining what you know what I mean, what God we're talking about here. But with divine forethought, that was kind of the interesting thing you touched on that I kind of wanted to talk a little bit back about. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to, well, and this is, by the way, I'm not a fundamentalist Christian. I'm not in any weird ritual temple cult by any means of any religion, you know? So we're talking about this objectively. If we step back, we're talking about the nature of God philosophically here. Now, if we're talking about divine forethought, if we're, let's say we're talking to apologists, we would say, well, how could he, if he's has divine forethought, then he created Adam knowing knowing Eve was going to bite from the apple, and all evil was introduced to the world. He created this world, it's evil, therefore all evil is subject of God, and that's kind of what we were going back to. Now, that is arguing against a divine forethought God against a fundamentalist apologetic Christian. Now, if we look at in terms of the nature of God, this is kind of what I've been talking about in my head over the last...
I need you to get to the point very quickly.
The point is that, do you think that it very well could be with divine forethought that that very well the whole nature of why being divine forethought, we have free will, everything was designed in a way to, okay, it's a dog eat dog world. How are you going to react? Are you going to react with kind and lovingness, or are you going to react in a glass half empty kind of way? So that kind of touched on a rebuttal to your divine forethought. God can't exist if he has divine forethought. So
I don't understand a word you're saying, to be honest.
You don't think that it could be, let's see, I don't want to use, the word ordained is kind of a loaded term. That means that everything was divine. That means that everything has this cosmic purpose.
Yeah, I understand that, but I still understand your point.
The point is that if a God with divine forethought could absolutely exist within the question you're talking about. You're raising a question of how could God do this? Therefore, all evil is God. Why would you want to worship a God that's basically essentially evil? And what I'm proposing is that this could all be a divine way, just like God created evil. There's good and evil. Even the word God's kind of a loaded term.
What's a divine way?
Obviously there has to be a yin and yang with everything. You got to have good with evil. You got to have, you know what I'm saying? To say that just because God created evil, all of a sudden that makes him bad, it's kind of like a false paradigm.
But God could have chosen not to create, yes?
Yeah, but nothing in nature exists without an antithesis, though. So you can't really have, in my belief, just by, we're talking about philosophically, theologically, I don't think, based on nature, everything has a duality. Everything has an antithetical dialectic.
When you say nature, do you mean physical nature?
I mean, we could go metaphysical. I mean,
okay, let's go metaphysical. Before God created, did he have a yin and a yang?
See, and what I will say this is where I don't agree with fundamentalists or most religions, is I really don't think there was a beginning or an end. I think that we live in a Fibonacci spiral that's, according to the second law of thermodynamics, nothing can be, you know what I mean?
Oh, so you don't believe, do you believe in God? Do you believe a God exists?
I do. Some sort of divine mind, something that connects us, something that kind of transcends.
Do you believe there was ever a time when this divine mind existed all by itself and nothing else?
I don't think so. I think creation and the creator are kind of like inseparable, just like beginning and ending. We can't really personify infinity.
Was there a time when there was no creation?
Honestly, this doesn't affect the nature of...
Ugh. What was that about? Yeah, he did sound like Zoroastrianist. But the thing where I was going with this is, if he believes that there's a creator, that means there's a creation. That means there was a time when there was no creation and just the creator. And therefore, was there a evil God and a good God, all bound in one nature before creation? If he believes there has to be a yin and a yang. Right? Weirdness. Alejandro. Hi. You can turn off your tab. You can turn off your tab on or did you already?
Doug?
It's going well.
Cool. So I wanted to ask you a question. So like take the worst version of Christianity, like the really bad one, like God hates you for being a sinner, and any questions that you have about it, like him existing maybe, are just you're being sinful and you're gonna go to hell for that. I've seen you like talk about how bad that is to like get Christians to think, is this something like you really believe? And like get them to doubt like how fucked up their worldview is. But I'm wondering, how do you know that that's not real?
The same way.
Like, can you like know that? Because like any thought that you would have about that not being real is just like Satan in your brain or whatever.
How do I know that a God, that the worst version of God doesn't exist? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, how do you know that? Like,
the same way I say I know that when I let go of this pen will fall towards the earth. In the exact same way, I know that this God doesn't exist because we as humankind have a pretty good idea, especially since the Enlightenment, how the world works, and there is no reason to believe that this worst version of the Christian God, let's say, exists within that world. That's how I know.
all right. Yeah, I'll think about that answer. Cool. I just wanted to know what you thought about that.
Yeah. So in the same way, when I let go of this pen, it might go up and defy the laws of gravity. In the same way, there might be this evil God that I term evil. Yeah, sure, but there's no reason to think this God exists. Now you light up my water-soaked napkin, then we'll talk. I might change my mind.
Right. Got you. All right, thanks, Doug.
Yeah, see ya. Okay, let's do something fun here. I'm going to open the room up for multiple people at one time, and I'll see if I can control the mayhem. So if Camille, you're still here, you can come back. Nathan, you can come in. You should watch this short clip. Limmy's advice when facing God's judgment. That's still too long. 5 minutes. Rosemary. Oh, I know you, Rosemary. How are you doing?
Hey, how are you?
Good. Coming to poker tonight?
I am planning to, yes.
Oh, excellent. Okay. So what did you think of the discussion so far?
I've enjoyed it. I missed your stream earlier in the week about when you were asking about Fatima, so that's why I wanted to jump on real quick.
Oh,
and
okay.
Yeah, I don't know debunking Fatima would work with someone like Trent because it's private revelation, and since the church, even though the church approves it as authentic,
is it private revelation
with private revelation
with 100,000 people?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anything after Jesus is private revelation. So you're only required to believe public revelation. So your creeds. Yeah. Oh, wait, I can't hear you.
No, I'm not talking.
Oh, okay.
There might be a delay. You got your tab off, the original tab?
Yeah, I'm going to close out the other tab so I'm not throwing off. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
I'll jump back in when I'm in. So yeah, it might work with somebody who's already doubting, because like when I deconverted, I was like, oh wait, what about Eucharistic miracles? And I quickly debunked them and I was fine.
Yeah. Well, that's the case for any argument for God. Like anything I could say is not going to work unless they're already, I think, starting to doubt. And otherwise they're just going to go to their favorite apologist and get an answer, and then they're going to wash their hands of it and say, I'm done. Okay. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are things like that. I think there are a lot of those people recanted their testimony, so to speak. But yeah, that's just what I wanted to jump on and say is I don't.
But if that's true, if that's true that there's
Mhm.
people who recanted their belief that there's a miracle of the sun, wouldn't that impact a guy like Trent?
Potentially, but I think because like I said, it is approved by the church at the global level, but it's still not required for you to believe it. You can believe that Jesus resurrected and not believe that Mary visits people in real life.
No, but he has a
So,
problem. He can't say that because he admitted to me in the debate that the evidence for the miracle of the sun is better than the evidence for Jesus, at least in some aspects. I think if he disbelieves one, he has to disbelieve, because the resurrection is as big, if not bigger, a claim than the miracle of the sun with less evidence. He has to be out. So I really do think we have to convince him the Fatima is a problem.
I mean, it would definitely weaken. It's just that if you're as deep in on the theology, you know that it's not required to believe it. So that's
by the church, the all-powerful Catholic Church,
yeah, you could fall back on, well, I'm not required to believe it, so I can still believe the resurrection.
Why do Catholics put so much stock in the church, the Catholic Church? Like, just because it says in Matthew that on this rock my church will be built, like, just that?
I think it's historical. A lot of it, development, it depends on which direction you went, like if you were in the East versus the West. So like definitely growing up Roman Catholic, it was very imperial in the sense of like the power of the Pope over all other bishops. But I don't know. It's hard for me to explain because I grew up with it. Like, how do I explain something that just seemed like breathing when I was growing up?
Like, are there Catholics who are mavericks, who are like very rebellious Catholics? Like, I can't imagine being my personality type and being a Catholic. It's like, the Pope said that. Who cares? Like, that'd be my initial reaction. Just a man. He puts on his pants. He has dangling testicles like I do. Like, who cares what the Pope says?
Right. And then depending on how much you get into it, some people they're like, well, you don't have to pay attention to most of what the Pope says. It's only when he says certain things. And then they're selective about which popes they want to listen to. So there's a lot of Catholics right now who don't like their Pope. I still culturally identify in that, but I don't believe God exists.
Oh, why do you culturally identify in it?
I think just because I grew up with it and it was such an important part of my identity that I haven't deconstructed that part.
Oh, do you want to do that today?
I don't know. I don't know if it makes a difference because I don't practice. I don't go to church. I just
Well, if you don't practice it in any way, then it's not part of your culture anymore.
Not really. It's just part of the identity of what I grew up with.
Okay. So just historically, you'd say you were raised this way?
Yeah.
Okay. But doesn't impact your life today?
No, I hadn't for a while.
Okay. So you're like me, except I'm a Mennonite, you're a Catholic.
Pretty much, I would say. I'm only 2.5 years into my post-theistic.
Oh, that's it? Only 2 years? Wow.
Yeah, August 2019, so about 2.5 years.
You're like a virgin. You're
pretty
fresh.
Much. I mean, very fresh atheist.
Okay. Anyhow, Rosemary, we'll see you later. I'm going to let Nathan in here.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right, we'll see you. Bye.
Hey, Nathan.
Hey. Oh, is Rosemary gone?
Yeah, I got rid of her.
Oh, I didn't know. Watching the other thing.
The timer doesn't actually start with whereby until there's 3 people in. So if
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So until I get a whole bunch of people who are asking to be on, I won't start the clock. But
I was thinking her cultural Catholicism could be a little bit like how you call yourself a Mennonite sometimes, whatever.
Yeah, I just said that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
oh,
to
okay.
her.
I must have missed that.
Yeah. Yeah. Liz Jackson. Waste of time? Lean yes, lean no.
It feels like a bit of a trap. It depends what you mean by waste of time. I mean, for
for your purposes, maybe, I don't think that there's going to be that much that kind of hinges on engaging with what she's got to say about these things, in terms of deconverting or converting people. I think some of the stuff she says is interesting, from a philosophical point of view, if you are on a sports team, for example, and you believe your team's not going to win a match, but should you still act in such a way that you try to win anyway? Like those kind of questions are kind of maybe weird, like crossword puzzles or whatever, if you're interested in that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't think a lot of people are going to be converting from these sorts of considerations.
What would happen if she and I talked? She and me?
I think she and I, yeah.
Yeah, I was right the first time. It's that British imperial upbringing.
Yeah, I's the subject. I think that I don't know if she would agree to it in the first place, because she might be a bit upset by like videos like this. But if she did agree to it, I'm not sure, to be honest. I think she tends to have quite liberal responses, and what I mean by liberal is she's not like, you have to believe exactly what I believe. Like these arguments, every rational person has to agree with the arguments as I put them forward. So she's going to be comfortable to say, yeah, if you disagree with this premise, or you think about that differently, that's fine. You're within your rights to do that. And I don't think she'd give you a lot of pushback around that stuff. And I don't know what you would. But I mean, I guess you could push back on some of the things that maybe she says about the wager and many gods and things. But the problem there is going to be that because she's writing papers and things on that the sort of way that she's talking about these things is going to just become technical very quickly. And I don't mean that like technical, it's beyond you. I just mean it's going to become very difficult to actually like make progress, because there's going to be like specialist language involved and all that sort of
Well,
stuff.
I would ask her questions, very simple questions like, I'm an atheist. Do you believe I'll go to heaven, hell, or something, someplace else?
Yeah.
Like she would
I
be
guess those
flustered.
would be interesting.
Yeah, she wouldn't. She doesn't want to talk about that stuff, but that is related to Pascal's wager, right?
Yeah. I don't know really exactly what she does believe about that. I think she might be an annihilationist or an eternal I don't think she's a universalist, but I don't know that she's definitely an eternal conscious torment person.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to be PhD nowadays and believe in eternal conscious torment, unless you have a Frank Turek PhD, I guess.
Yeah, or one of those Braxton Hunter Trinity College ones.
Yeah. No, what I'm noticing is like I for a long time been having theists call in. I noticed you did it the other day, and I noticed the Gnostic Informant had a theist call in.
Right.
It's like more and more it's catching on. More and more atheists are doing theist call-ins, and you know what? Not one Christian channel that I
has picked up on it.
Do these impromptu types. Like I know there's call-ins, like Greg Kokel has a call-in show but I mean face-to-face, camera on camera, impromptu. Hey, I'm live streaming. Come on in.
I was gonna say there's Smoky Saint, right? Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah. To be fair, like I think that there's maybe like one or maybe two Christian channels that are like that, but they're like fully insane. Like
but they don't do one-on-one.
No, it's not
atheist only.
Really.
Like what? This is what I'm. This is a call out to all Christian channels listening right now. Have a channel, a time, one day a week, let's say, where it says call in atheists only, and was just you, the content creator, and an atheist, and you talk. I dare you to do it. You're too scared. You can't do it.
Well, there's probably one guy that would take you up on that, and it'd be like Jonathan McLatchy, and you'd get people calling in, like just trying to communicate with him, and he'd be like coming out with, like just scripted blog posts.
He used to have something like that, but it wasn't one-on-one. It was he'd bring an expert on, and then people would come in and ask the expert questions. Right. But yeah, Jonathan, this be perfect for you. Someone who has Jonathan's ear should make sure he hears this. Start a YouTube channel, or you have a YouTube channel already, but just have people call in.
It'd be really interesting to see more like open conversations of some of the big Christian apologists, just to kind of see how they think about things more openly, because often people only get exposed to how they think about these things you know, in a very controlled environment and edited videos and things like that. So it'd be good to see how they respond on the spot to being asked questions and things in different contexts. But, you know, people, I guess you see a bit of that with people like IP in debates, but it'd be good to see that without the defenses up in that debate context, just kind of conversationally.
Yeah, exactly. But they can't. Yeah, this is why Trent Horn wouldn't talk to me, right? Because he's not comfortable with that.
And look at what I mean, that screenshot Camille sent you, right, of when IP does talk to someone like Bottom and in a non-debate setting, and is like, you know, conversationally nodding his head along to points that disagree or whatever. Wait, what the hell? I've been lied to.
Well, I have to say that that wasn't a typical comment. Like, surprisingly, a lot of people in his comment section were like okay with that and happy. Not everyone.
Okay.
But I think if cultivated pretty liberal audience of Christians who are fine with that. And I'm actually thinking like what's up with him, because he's not been very active lately.
He's been doing a lot more like TikTok content. I think maybe he thinks that that's where things are going, so he's focusing on that. I'm not 100% sure though.
Yeah.
Well, isn't he getting his PhD in something right now?
He was doing a master's in philosophy, and I think so. He might be in his second year of that.
Oh yeah, where are the times when I was doing my master's? 12 years ago. Yeah. Well, I mean, he did re-release the video about Exodus.
Right.
Apparently, all you have to do is to redate it by like 200 years, and you don't have to.
And you have to put David Falk's face in the thumbnail as well. He's worked a number on him, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's just like, you know, exactly the same text, exactly the same story, but you can just move it by hundreds of years, and it doesn't matter, right?
Pio, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. And I'm just here to have two things. The one thing, you don't need to be afraid of the Yahweh God, because he doesn't evidently exist. And I know it because my pew invented him. And the second thing is, I realized just while I was watching your stream right now, I asked you like half a year ago if I could join your poker game. And then you told me I have to like write you an email.
Yes.
And until now, I couldn't find the email where I can ask you.
Okay, in 3 hours, in 5 minutes, we're gonna do a tournament. Email me.
Yeah, which email? That's the most important thing.
The DLL one. This one. I'll put it in the chat. And Camille Nathan, I don't know why you guys don't do it.
I only play Dungeons and Dragons.
Let's pass my bedtime.
Hey, when you play against me, it is like playing Dungeons and Dragons.
I don't like games with high level of abstraction. I like games where the pieces and cards actually symbolize concrete things.
Oh,
like
you can't get more
soldiers.
Isn't Dungeons and Dragons like someone is inventing the story, and you are just following it?
Oh, it's much more than that. It's
You
a magical
invent it as
tale
you
of
go.
adventure and.
Yeah, no, you like.
Hey, Omar.
Okay.
What worries me about PineCreek's poker sessions though is that every time that he says to someone, "Do you play poker?" So every time someone responds, "No, I've never played it before," he goes, "Oh, don't worry about that. Come along, right?" It's like, yeah,
we're just having fun.
Yeah, I've played poker exactly enough times not to fall for that, but also not to play.
Just because Anthony Magnabosco paid for my trip to Disney World doesn't mean anything. So Pio, yeah, we'll see you in 3 hours. Send me an email and I'll make sure you get the link, okay? Okay, Pio? Okay. He didn't say yes or no, but hey, Omar, you want to talk about Islam?
Hey guys, how are you guys doing?
Good. So you know what you believe is false, right?
Excuse me?
You know what you believe and hold dear to your heart is false, right?
Says you, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you want to talk about, Omar?
Yeah, I don't. Whatever you guys like. You said you had this open forum, so whatever
Yeah,
you guys prefer to
was
talk
it you
about.
who sent me that list of 15 reasons to believe that Islam is true?
15 reasons, 17 videos. None of it was addressed.
Yeah, do you want to address it now quickly? Do you have it in front of you?
The reasons? I'll open them. I'll find them.
I'm wondering how many of them will have to do with Islam specifically, as opposed to theism in general.
Yeah, we want to talk about Islam, not theism in general. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
We'll go through them, and then you guys can decide theism or Islam.
When you emailed me the first time, did you use the name Omar?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna see if I can find it here too. Here, I found it.
Let me get my Quran.
I'm using my
number one.
Yeah, hang on. I think I'm gonna find it here and then bring it up. I got it. Okay. So now remember, we're going to talk about Islam and not just general theism.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see here.
Would you like to read them?
Yeah, I can read them here. I got them up. So is that big? Oh no, you guys can't see me. But if you go to my YouTube channel, Nathan and Camille, and put it on mute, you can read it.
It's a couple of seconds behind though. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's always a pleasure. Please find the following reasons why we can consider Islam. It provides a reasonable approach towards understanding the Creator compared to the rest of religions. Okay, so my quick answer to that would be Christians would say the same thing. Mormons would say the same thing. Even Hindus could say the same thing. Jews definitely say the same thing. And we're still left with figuring out which branch of theism is correct. Do you agree with that?
Anyone can say what they want, but can they prove it?
Okay, so how would you prove?
Can you say the Christian doctrine is a lot easier to understand compared to the Islamic one? One God compared to a Trinity?
But here's the problem, and I bolded it here, a reasonable approach. It seems like all the adherents to Islam would say Islam has the more reasonable approach. All the adherents to Christianity would say Christianity has the more reasonable approach. You see where we're getting at? It's very subjective.
The point, yeah, okay, you can start off subjective, but then you have to objectify it by proving it. Can you prove it? Christians, no, because Christians themselves
that's not you'd agree that's not the point, though, is it, Omar? It says the point here is that it provides a reasonable approach, right? So another point could be you can prove it.
Yeah, but the point is that you bring up these contentions and then you say, can you prove this contention or not? If you can't prove the contention, then the contention is moot, correct?
So how would you prove with a capital P that Islam is the only reasonable approach? Is that what you're saying? It's the only reasonable approach?
I said it it's the most reasonable. I should change that to most reasonable.
Is the most reasonable religion true? Could it be the case that all religions are true or false, and that doesn't matter how reasonable they are? Could it be the case that even the most reasonable religion is still false?
Oh, 100%, but that it's a collective approach. So when you first come to look at it,
do you think it being reasonable is evidence in favor of it being true?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it helps because if it's
Why?
not reasonable, then because it helps the case. Because if it's not reasonable, then it doesn't fall the case.
I mean, I agree that if it's not reasonable, it's not evidence for it being true. But that's not the question. The question is, if it's reasonable, is it evidence that it's true? Because
it supports it.
I don't actually think that's the case, right? Because if it's true that reason leads to God, then reason is a really good naturalistic explanation for why religions exist.
In what sense?
Well, I mean, if there's a bunch of arguments that are really persuasive, where the conclusion is that a God exists, and then you see people worshipping gods, then it's not a mystery why they are doing it, right? They're not doing it because the religion is actually true. They are doing it because they are convinced of the arguments.
Not necessarily, because they're probably just born into it. They're just born into it and never really thought otherwise. Never really questioned why.
Yeah, that's not evidence for the religion being true either, right?
No, but that's more of a case against your point. The fact that they never thought about it being true or they found it reasonable because they never saw the other reason. a person that comes up to you and always thought that a certain, for example, during the prophet's time, people thought bearing kids were as normal, bearing their daughters, until he asked them, why were you doing it? Then it actually made them think. There was a philosopher or a person that talked about thrownness, where people are just thrown into this certain society or a certain environment and they just accept it without even considering or questioning or even self-reflecting. Therefore, if they're in that position or in that situation and they think that this is logical, that doesn't mean anything, because you can easily point how it's illogical.
Is it reasonable to maybe a better way to go through this is just to give you what I or what Camille or Nathan would give to each of these very quickly, and then you'll just disagree, and then we can end the call, right? Because there's nothing we can say to convince you otherwise, I bet. And but if you really truly want to know where we're coming from, we can tell you.
Yeah. Maybe that.
No, I got what you guys are saying. You guys are saying that any religion can say this. Therefore, your claim is just a subjective claim. But what I'm trying to say is that anyone can make this claim, but then you have to prove it. They have a hypothesis, and then you have to show how this is either true or false.
Yeah, I understand. You've said this 2 times now or 3 times, but
that wasn't my response to point 1 either. I was just kind of clarifying because I didn't think what you said to Doug's response was very compelling.
So yeah, I basically don't think it's a reasonable approach, and anyone can say it's a reasonable approach because they're basing reason on what they view they can prove and so forth. It provides a rational approach to understanding life and purpose. Again, almost every religion would say the exact same thing, and you would say, but can you prove it? And I would say, well, they think they can prove it. And the question is, if we get a whole bunch of different biases in the room, are we all agreed? And of course, with Islam, of course not.
You guys are experts in Christianity, so let's do it comparing both. You can compare Islam to Christianity and see, because you guys hold the position of a Christian and defend that side. So if you go to point 1,
so for point 1, the approach would be that there are various a priori proofs that God exists, and then we have special revelation through the Bible that gets us to the specific revelation of the Christian God. And then the Islamic approach would be that there are certain a priori proofs that God exists, and then there's special revelation through the Quran that gets us to the claim that Muhammad was his final prophet.
And then we come down to the reasonable approach of the nature of God.
Well, the point is that they're both the exact same approach, though, aren't they, in terms of their reasonableness? They're both on the same level.
Yeah, of course, you have to judge something through its own paradigm to be fair. So, yeah, definitely, you have to take it under its paradigm and see what they're saying. But I'm more than happy to move on to the next point just to keep the conversation going.
Number 2 is very similar to number 1. Number 3, it provides a comprehensive and pious approach to how people should live their lives. Yeah, that doesn't mean Islam is true. Something can be comprehensive and give an approach of how they should live their lives and still be based on something false, correct?
Granted.
Okay, number 4, it provides an objective approach of how... that's the same as number 3, Omar. 4 and 3 are very related. Number 5,
sorry. 3 is more of a personal thing, while 4 is more of a collective society thing. There's a difference.
And again, I gave the same objection.
Seems like 3 is going to be true for any religion as well.
I don't see in Christianity there's any laws about how society should operate.
That's true. I'll grant you that, but even if Islam does do that, that doesn't mean it's based on something true, correct?
No. So
okay, so we're agreed. Number 5, its message is universal and suits all humanity despite their culture and traditional backgrounds. It suits all humanity, really.
It doesn't suit me.
Doesn't suit some women in Saudi Arabia.
Where are you from, Nathan?
England.
Yeah, there's so many British Muslims. So many.
No, I know. Yeah, it might suit them. It doesn't suit me.
No, but it still suits your culture. Your culture doesn't get affected. The people that are from your culture.
My culture is kind of a bit more contingent on the specific area I'm raised in and so forth, isn't it? Right?
Does it suit a Muslim woman in Pakistan who wants to drive her car?
Does it suit a woman in Pakistan that wants to drive her car? I think women can drive in Pakistan normally.
I don't think so. And I
think Saudi Arabia was the only country. I think Saudi Arabia was the only country that people weren't allowed to drive.
Okay, does it suit a woman who wants to drive in Saudi Arabia?
Well, she can drive now, yeah.
If she can't
It
drive,
suits. it suits them.
do you see how this is just all so silliness? Because what its message is universal. What if the message is women shouldn't drive?
There's no message in Islam that says women shouldn't drive. This is
Can they
completely
be
a
imams?
cultural thing. Excuse me?
Can they be imams?
Can women become imam? Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no rule against it. There's no rule against that.
Can a woman go out at night without a chaperone or a male? Is that a
There's
part of the
no rule.
message?
She can go out without a chaperone. Yeah.
Okay, so
sometimes.
you're basically
In some cases, yeah.
turning
In some cases.
you're basically turning Islam into Christianity.
How so?
Well, because your ethics.
I said in some cases a woman can go out at night. There's no ruling that a woman is not allowed to drive. You guys can't show any kind of proof that. On the contrary, if you guys can, then okay, but you guys can't.
No, but the point is that the message is based on humans, how they interpret or how they want to view the message.
No, the one we're looking at is it's a universal and it suits all humanity despite their culture and traditional backgrounds and upbringing.
If it doesn't
So
suit
for
me
certain
though,
women
and I'm a
America-
human, then that's not true.
Say that again. Sorry.
If I'm a human and it doesn't suit me, then it's not true that it suits all humanity. It doesn't matter what my culture is. As long as I'm a human and the message doesn't suit me, then that's not true.
Well, what's the message?
Okay.
Hang on, we got to back up.
The
What's
message?
what's the message that's universal and suits all humanity?
It's serve the Creator by serving life. This is the message of Islam, in a nutshell.
To serve the Creator and to serve
By
life?
serving life. By serving life. Yeah, being a contributor to life, not being one that corrupts it.
Okay, so the message is just do good?
Under the premise that with God, the intentions are to God, to see God's face.
Okay, and what
to
if
return back to the source that created us, that brought us into this existence.
and what if people disagree on what it means to serve the Creator and do good? Then what?
Then we have a war.
There's a revelation. That's what it tells us.
Is Shia the correct message or the Sunnis? Which one has the more correct message?
They read the same book.
Okay. The man behind the message was one of the most profound histories that history has ever known. Most profound individuals that history has ever known. Really?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
I like how it says one of the most, not even the most, right? I guess you get points for like humility, but
there was a man called Michael. Well, because at the end of the day, it is a subjective thing for a person. But when you look at it objectively, and you see like a person called Michael H. Hart, who ended up doing compiled a list of 100 people.
100 people, yeah.
Yeah, he ended up putting Muhammad number one, and he had absolutely no reason to do it.
Yeah, except for money.
I
except for Muslims buying his book.
Oh yeah, they paid him? Is that what you're saying? They paid him to say number one? Muhammad?
No, I'm saying that by writing that, he got a lot of Muslims to buy his book.
Oh, so you thought it was a publicity stunt? That's what it was, and it wasn't only him. It was him and like 5 or 6 other people, right? So they all.
But you just said they compiled their list and put people in it for absolutely no reason. So it's not a very
They
good
just
list.
They wanted to
indicating
see
how
who was the
profound.
most profound person in history. And
Okay,
then
well,
they realized
these are all Omar. In my opinion, these have been all pathetic. But we'll stop at number 7. We'll do one more because this is the one I think will be interesting. The knowledge that is indicated within the Quran predates their discoveries. Really?
Yeah, definitely.
Can you give an example?
I even sent you a video. I even sent you that video of the mosquito, and yet you never wanted to play it. It was a great example of the mosquito.
Is that the example you want to give here?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So summarize this mosquito. How does that indicate knowledge that predates their discoveries?
So the verse states, basically in a nutshell, that God does not shy away of presenting an example as small as a mosquito or what's on top of it. And those who believe know that it's the truth from their Lord. And those who disbelieve wonder or say, what does Allah intend by this example?
What are you talking about?
And thus, I'm saying the verse. And thus by this, he makes many guided and he leaves many astray. So the key here is that the mosquito he's talking about a mosquito, and then he says what's on top of it. The Arabic word for this word, this preposition, is فَمَا فَوْقَهَا. This word can have two meanings. One is what is greater, which is on size. So the context would be God does not shy from showing you an example of a mosquito or what is greater than it to show that he exists. And then the second example
Wait,
is,
hang
or
on,
the
hang
second
on
meaning.
a second for the first one, Omar. Is that the claim then that if there's something bigger than a mosquito, then God exists?
No, it's to examine. He's indicating this kind of creature for us to examine and to see that such a creature can exist through such functionality and such great systems.
Wait, did it say such functionality and such great systems in the text?
No, that he's.
Or is that
because-
what you're
No,
bringing?
because when you look at the Quran collectively, you see that he's constantly telling us to observe nature, observe this, observe that, and indicates all these different things. But to get to the specific point here is that he says فَمَا فَوْقَهَا, which is the second interpretation, and it would go into what I first said, is that he won't be shy of sending an example of a mosquito or what's on top of it. Today, through research and through microscope, we see that some mosquitoes have these parasites that live on top of them. And therefore, there is no way.
And so God exists?
People in
No,
the
there's
ancient
no
world
way
did
that
believe that
every
there
man-
are smaller things than mosquitoes.
I'm saying that therefore, there's no way a Bedouin man in the desert would have known such a thing to even make such a statement.
People in the ancient world did believe there are smaller things than mosquitoes.
To live on top of a mosquito, to make that specific claim, is very specific.
Yeah, like there would be no reason for
Show
them
me.
to exclude the top of the mosquito from
Show me
all of the
something that
locations
somebody's
where the
shown me.
smaller things can exist. Dust particles are smaller than mosquitoes.
Mustard seeds.
People did know that there are dust particles. They also believed in atoms. How is it possible that thousands of years before atoms were confirmed to exist scientifically, there were entire schools of philosophy that correctly predicted that atoms exist?
Omar's under the impression that Muhammad wrote the Quran, or through.
I think Democritus was a god because he correctly predicted that atoms exist.
Hold on, I got to take it off. Come back a second.
Yeah.
Well, that was
a waste
better
of
than
time.
the 7-day week.
How do I say this strongly enough? Muslims, arguments like this are horrible. They're terrible. I don't even know why you even bring them up, because they're so subjective. You think you can prove things, but really you're pretending to know things you don't know. A lot of the things that you think that the Quran could never have known or predicted were known prior. You're under this false impression that Muhammad heard from God and then orally told this to a few people to write down, when that's not the case. It was like the collective knowledge of that area at the time was used to construct the Quran, including knowing things about the Old Testament and Christianity. Islam is false.
I think in 10 years, there will be leading Muslim apologists who will say that certain portions of the Quran are mytho-history. To be
Sorry
honest.
about that, guys.
Well, there's still, there already are a few perfect Dawa types.
Yeah. Anyhow, I think, Omar, there's nothing left to talk about.
Oh. So I just got on randomly. All right, no worries. Thanks
Yeah.
for having me on. Yeah. Take care of yourselves.
Okay, take care.
Yeah.
Nice try.
Yeah, I would maybe ask him if there are any passages in the Quran which people claim contradict scientific knowledge.
Well, of course it'd say no.
Well,
no, he would.
He knows the
have to
correct
say-
answer is yes. So
he
what
would
he
have
would
to
actually
say
what
that,
he'd say is like, well, you think there is, but you know, there's this, and he'd just start talking about like all these reasons that justify like believing yes and no at the same time, and it'd be a mess.
Yeah, so every time you find something that seems to confirm our current scientific knowledge, then that's great. And every time you find something that seems to disconfirm it, then you just have to roll up your sleeves and start explaining it away, right?
What did you want to say, Otangelo? Does your mic work? No. Okay. Get out of here.
Yeah, that's a shame. I was really keen on having a conversation about the Shroud of Turin.
Well, especially when he came in, when the guy's talking about mosquitoes and stuff, you can just tell that Angelo's starting to think, yes, the function of the mosquito. It is designed.
Oh, you know, I watched a video on the Shroud of Turin the other day, and I never knew this, but when they carbon dated it, they had like several pieces of cloth from ancient cloth, I don't know, and they didn't tell the testers which was from the Shroud, and it was all a blind study, and the Shroud came in at like 1200 AD, and it's like you're done at that point.
Yeah, and it's actually really interesting that you know, I guess people who still think that the Shroud is authentic, they say that the problem with that study is that they didn't actually carbon date a fabric from the Shroud. They've carbon dated a fabric from a patch that was added to a Shroud later. Isn't that just an amazing coincidence that the Shroud happens to be patched exactly in the same period of time as when it first shows up in like history, where we have documentation of it existing? And isn't it an amazing coincidence that people just happen to pick that specific part of the Shroud where the patch is to do the carbon dating?
Right. Well, this is like
I don't have enough faith to believe that.
This is like when, you know, when they invented telescopes and started seeing there were craters and things in the moon, and some people came up with a theory like, yeah, there's a crater in the substance underneath, but there's a perfectly smooth, transparent surface on top. That is like, you know, come on.
Yeah. Well, maybe, you know, God like poured a liquid over it and then it's smooth, right? So it's perfectly smooth. It's just
Try again, Otangelo.
Yeah, is it better now?
Yes.
Was.
Okay.
Is it
Oh, hang on. Is that Nathan talking or is it Otangelo talking? Well, that is Otangelo. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it was.
Hey, Otangelo, even if the Shroud was dated to the 1st century, how do you know it's Jesus's?
Well, the odds that it's not Jesus is 1 to 89 million.
89 million people were crucified?
No, the odds that it is not Jesus is 1 to 89 million.
How'd you get that number?
Okay, let me just quick.
Bayesian analysis, probably.
Because I think that Shroud actually belongs to one of the criminals next to Jesus. Prove me wrong.
Let me...
It actually emits radiation, and that happening without the resurrection is like 1 in 80 million.
And that's what resurrections do. Yeah.
Actually,
that's what resurrections
actually,
do.
that Shroud was from a guy a year after Jesus named Butch. He was crucified, put it in a tomb. Because if you look closely, there's a letter B on the tomb. B for Butch. Like, you can't disprove that. This is nuts talk. This is nutso talk to think that even if you have this Shroud, that you could say it's for sure Jesus's. I know you're Googling right now or finding your files.
Yes, Habermas, he says that multiplying these probabilities, he points out 8 different distinct things on the Shroud which are described in the Gospels. Multiplying these probabilities, we have 1 chance in 82 million.
Oh my goodness!
That the man buried in the Shroud is not Jesus. So I don't think I should now go down all the things that be boring for you guys. But
And what's the base factor for each of these 8 pieces? We could actually calculate it, right? But I
It's
don't
going to be
want
factors
do
of
that.
89 million. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah, as I said, I mean, there are 8 points which are listed here, and they
what's
make that
what's the base factor for them?
Well, I can give you the first, for example. It says both exhibit a severe beating and scourging. Then he lists all the passages in the Gospels, and 1 in 2 probability that the crucified man other than Jesus was beaten in this way. Then he goes on, both had a crown of
hang
thorns.
on there, though. Let's wait one by. So, how many people would have been beaten in a way similar to in the crucifixion narratives that were crucified by the Romans, Camille? Is it?
Well, we don't. Of
Is
course
it
we don't
Jesus and
have-
one other person, or would lots of people have been beaten in the way Jesus was beaten?
Yeah. And what does it exactly mean, the way Jesus was beaten?
I think he's talking about the slit on the hip or something, abdomen.
No, I think that must be one of the other points, right? Because otherwise you don't have 8 points if you just put everything in under point 1. What would be a beating that's not consistent with the description of in the Gospels?
You would have a man which doesn't show any signs that he was beaten.
Yeah, what would be a beating which is inconsistent with the Gospels?
Well,
let's say that he was beaten. Let's say that he was beaten, but in a different way. So can you give me an example?
Well, the base fact here just says that he was beaten, which is described in the Gospels.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's not a base fact.
Okay.
What Camille was asking for a base factor, and that is a fact. Well, an alleged fact. And then
I'm not asking for a base fact. I'm asking for base, as in Thomas' base. Because
hey, we're gonna bore people with the B word,
right,
unless it's Butch. But I gotta.
Does it have radiation on the list? Let's get to the radiation.
I think I can prove to Tangela that the shroud is bunk with one simple thing. Here's the picture of the shroud. Do you see it?
Oh, we can't. But if he goes to the other tab, he'll have.
Oh, that's right. Let me.
Yeah, we've got it now.
You see it, Tangelo? The picture?
No, I don't see it. But anyway.
No. This is very important. Nathan can see it. Camille can see it.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes, I can see it.
Okay. You see the face, right? You see the hair, the head. Now go
Yes,
up.
of course.
Now go up, and you see like a semicircle above the head.
Yes.
Do you know what that is?
No, I don't.
That's the back of the head.
No, it's not. There is a distance.
Okay, but what is that then?
There is a distance. It is a sign from
God.
water. No. If you give me a picture of the entire shroud, then
This
you will
is.
see that this. No,
Well, this is
no,
from the
you
head
are
up.
just showing the head. You are just showing the head. This
Yeah.
is kind of. I don't know if this is a burn mark or a watermark or
Oh,
something.
really?
But it is
Or
not
the back of the head.
You
It
don't.
is not the back of the head. The
Okay.
back of the head, there is a distance, and if you show me the entire shroud, you will see that.
Okay, Otangelo, listen to what you're saying too. You're saying you know it's not the back of the head, right?
Yes, because if you give me a picture of the entire shroud, you will see that there is a distance between the back and the...
Okay, very good. If this was the back of the head, would you agree that this would be a concocted fake?
Yes, of course.
Done. We're done.
What would be the problem with it?
No, show me the entire shroud, and you will see that the back head, there is a distance between the image.
No,
of the
here's the
front
entire
and-
shroud here. Look, there's no distance.
No. Show me the entire shroud. You are not showing me
Right
the
here.
entire shroud.
Oh,
No,
hang on. I
that's
haven't.
not the entire
Sorry,
shroud.
I can see it, but you can't. Let me.
I don't understand.
I'll explain it to you in a
the
second, Camille.
Okay.
Here's the entire shroud.
No, you need to show me the entire shroud in one piece as it is.
Oh
as
my
it is.
goodness, Otangelo, you're being so obtuse right now.
No, I'm not. Because I can, I mean,
This
if
is
I would
okay.
show
Hang
you-
on, hang on, hang on,
I've got a
Otangelo.
picture of it if you.
The entire shroud is about 4 meters in length. Show me the entire shroud, and then you will see that there is a distance between the front part
Why
and
would
the
you
back part.
why
of
would
the
you wrap a
body.
corpse? Why would you wrap a corpse in a shroud that's that long? Isn't that
I think
like
Doug is right
superficial?
though. It does actually come up right against the.
Yeah.
From the one I'm looking at, a full length image that I just put in the chat link.
This one here.
Yeah, that there's an image. I don't know what that. I mean, that blood could
hang
be
on,
from anything.
hang
but
on.
the
Let me. You see it now? This one? Is that what you want, Otangelo?
Yeah, right. Now you see in the middle there is a distance between the back and the back side and the front side.
No,
Yes,
this
of
is
course.
still
Yeah.
touching his head.
No. You see that distance, and that is that is okay. The distance. I don't think that you're making a case here.
Well,
That is not
okay.
that black point in the middle isn't his head.
This is to let Camille know what we're talking about because you were wondering. So if you, Camille, were to just wrap someone, you got the circumference of the top of your head, and that would have to have a space because what you're seeing with the picture is you see a semicircle touching the top of the head. That's supposed to be the back of the head.
No, it's not.
I know, Otangelo, I know you don't believe that because if you do believe that, then the shroud is dead for you. I understand that
Yeah,
you
of
have to push
course.
back on,
Yeah,
on
but
that.
I showed you the black point in the middle, which is that distance which you claim isn't there, but it's there.
Was the image generated by wrapping the body?
No.
How was it generated?
There are some theories how it was generated. We know that it is not a painting, okay? And they have made some experiments to try to reproduce the shroud, and they say here a burst of 34,000 billion watts of vacuum ultraviolet radiation produced a discoloration on the uppermost surface of the shroud's fibrils without scorching it, which gave rise to a perfect three-dimensional negative image of both the frontal and dorsal parts of the body wrapped in it. We currently do not know.
So what's the actual substance that is responsible for the coloration?
It is not a substance. It is the entire image is very superficial in nature, around 20 to 30 microns in depth, is approximately 0.2 thousandths of a millimeter. Only on the uppermost surface of the fibrils, the inner side is not. Thus, it could not have been formed by chemicals. The image resides on the outermost layer of the linen fibers.
Yeah, but what is the image? If it's not a painting, if it's not paint, like why is it the case that there are different colors in different regions of the shroud?
Yeah. I'll read it for you. Just give me a quick minute, okay? Okay, it is.
It just boggles my mind that Christians are so desperate for physical evidence that they'll believe this. Sorry, Otangelo, but this is nuts.
Well, explain to me how the image was made.
I don't understand what the image is.
Well, it was made by however much energy worth of
Yeah, but
light.
How did the energy produce the coloration? Like, what is it different about some of the regions of the shroud so that it forms a figure? Like, what's the actual physical basis for the
Right,
coloring?
I see. Yeah.
It is basically a discoloration on the uppermost surface
Yeah,
of the
what caused
shroud's
the like?
fibrils.
What's the physical like nature of the discoloration? Like discoloration can be caused by a color added to a surface. You
Okay,
think
here.
it's not
Okay,
that.
I got it.
So
Okay,
what is it?
I'll read it from you for you. From the chemical point of view, the image is due to a molecular modification of the surface of the linen fibrils constituted by polysaccharides, chains of glucose. These polysaccharides underwent an alteration as a consequence of an acting at a distance phenomenon. In particular, the chemical reaction consists of dehydration with oxidation and conjugation, acid-base reaction. The image is not composed of painting pigments or other substances of that kind.
Yeah, it could be real blood. That doesn't
Well,
mean
there
that
is real.
it
Well,
doesn't
there
mean it's
is real
Jesus's.
blood. Well, there is real blood on the shroud.
Yeah, that doesn't mean it's Jesus's, right?
No, I mean, okay, so if I understand correctly, then in some of the regions, like the fabric underwent a chemical reaction,
Right.
like dehydration and these kinds of
Yeah.
things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Doug, it says that the meeting is going to end in 5 minutes, so I guess
Yeah.
that's correct. Yeah. Okay. So maybe last question, and it's more of a meta question. If this is convincing, why is it the case that basically no Christian apologist is using this as evidence for the resurrection?
Well, Habermas is.
Yeah, but he's the only one. Like, why is it the case that William Lane Craig or J. Warner Wallace, who actually is a qualified forensic expert, thinks that the evidence is inconclusive? Why is it the case? It can't be supernatural bias. So what's the problem?
Well, there are other apologists like
Yeah, but that's not the question I'm asking. I'm asking about these people. Why is it the case that the Shroud of that virtually nobody, no professional apologist, I can name 100 who are
Only the
not using it
topmost
when they are
fibrils.
making a case for Christianity? What
Well,
explains that?
you should ask them and not me.
Do you have any idea? I haven't asked them, and I can give you some explanations. Do you have an idea?
No, I don't.
Does it make you wonder why they are not using it? Because I can
think
explain it
should be-
very, very easily.
Oh, okay. So please do it then.
They don't use it because they don't think the evidence is convincing.
Okay, so ask them why they think it is not convincing. Because I had an interview with Barry Schwartz, which was one of the Stirp team. He was a Jew, which was skeptic
Exactly,
about
it's this
it.
thing, isn't it?
And well, but these were not Christians. Like Barry Schwartz is a Jew, and he was a skeptic. He wasn't convinced it was actually Jesus. And after 18 years, in 1995, when he knew that the blood is from a real man, it is from a tortured man, he came to the conclusion that it is actually Jesus.
My goodness. It would be nice if we had DNA checks to confirm it, right?
See, you're talking about Macron's 1980 claims here, aren't you? When you're talking about the polysaccharides and stuff.
No, Macron, he claims that the blood is painting, and he is right, because there is, inasmuch as blood, there is also some red ochre pigments on the shroud, and that is because probably in the 14th, 15th century or so, they tried to enhance the color to be red.
Oh.
But they have actually, they did find, inasmuch as a red blood as well, at these same points they did find some red pigments. And these are the pigments which Macron mentions when he claims that it is a painting.
And you also have a response to Giovanni Righi's theory that it's a substance chemically resembling natron, a powder used in ancient Egypt to dehydrate the corpse prior to embalming.
Well, Nathan, they have made several attempts to reproduce the shroud. And if you check and compare these attempts and the results with the actual shroud, like Carlos Kelly in recent times, then it is a far cry from the original. It doesn't come even close.
Is the shroud one piece?
This one piece, yes.
Okay, that contradicts John 20, verse 7. Who are you going to believe? The gospel author of John or the Shroud?
Well, there are they are going together. They used some. They used some.
Do they sew it back together?
Yeah, they did bind
Ah.
the hands together and also the foot, and then they used the linen. So they used both.
Is there any evidence that
They
it's been sewn
complete-
together?
Well, I mean,
John
I could give
20,
you-
verse 7 contradicts your belief in the Shroud.
No, it doesn't. And
The face of the cloth which had been on Jesus. Oh, yeah, you guys are gone. I'll just read it here. John 20, verse 7. And the face cloth which had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen cloth, but folded up in a place by itself, which makes it sound like that there was a separate cloth for Jesus' head. But the shroud is not a separate cloth for Jesus' head and then a cloth for his body. You're done. Hey, all you Christians who love to believe that the Bible is the inerrant word of God, you now have to dismiss the Quran. The Shroud of Turin. There you go. And yeah, where was the Shroud the first 1,200 years of Christianity? Isn't it ironic that when the Shroud appears into history in the 13th or 12th century, whenever it was, that's the date it was carbon dated at. Oh my goodness. Give it up, Otangelo. I love the abrupt endings. So just. And again, what's more likely that people desired some physical evidence, conjured it up in the 13th century, or that God decided not to preserve the original documents of the Bible, but preserve the shroud that Jesus was wrapped in? Like, think about how stupid that is, Christians who believe in the shroud. The shroud was preserved that Jesus was wrapped in, but not the originals of the Gospels? Yes, Paul Schlechter, this is beyond stupid. The creator of the universe somehow desired the shroud to be preserved, but not his word? Come on. And what's that thing above his head? I don't know. Yeah, I just pooped them out of existence. Tangelo, hear me. I'll say this to one. I know you like me, and I like you. But this is a classic case of being desirous for something to be true. You want the shroud to be authentic. So you can say that you have some evidence that Jesus... What's this evidence of, really? It's not evidence of a resurrection. It's evidence that, even if you're right, this is the shroud of Jesus, it's evidence that he was wrapped in a cloth. I'm not granting that, but I'm saying at best. Now you're going to say, well, the reason why when Jesus was resurrected, he gave off radiation. Like, what ad hoc craziness is this? Yeah, and this is why Habermas believes it as well, because he knows his minimal facts is bunk. This is why Habermas clings so desperately to the shroud and to even NDEs, because he realizes that what he has is nada, nusht, crapola, terrible. And if you came late, if it's true that Habermas stopped debating because of me, I don't believe that, but if that's true, that's just I mean, my experience with PineCreek hurt me. I see what you're saying, potentially. You're saying that there was one cloth that went over Jesus' head, but there was another cloth, right? A cloth that went all around Jesus, then another cloth that went over Jesus' head, and then that cloth was separated from the other cloths, as talked about in the Gospel of John. You see how ad hoc you have to get to explain all this? And it was dated to the 13th century, blind dated. The scientists who dated it didn't even know it was the Shroud of Turin when they dated it. My goodness. And then you got to come up with ad hoc reasons why the dating is faulty, why it was tampered with, or whatever. And the thing is, even guys like, I heard Mike Lacona even say, oh, I read this, why we can't trust the carbon-14 dating. It shows the desperation even in Lycona. Lycona has jettisoned the Gospels to show that he relies on Paul often when he debates. He's down to nothing. If true, it's a legitimate miracle. No, Aaron Coulson. I could even say, even if the Shroud of Turin is of Jesus, it does not show a resurrection. Am I wrong? Did Kokol say anything else online about your interaction afterwards? No, he didn't, so far as I know. He just posted our original 2 interactions because I think he was embarrassed about the last one. Yeah, Doorknob had, that's what Canadian Catholics said. I don't know if I believe them. Yeah, Mark Von Wisco, part of the reason why Lycona believes is because of his idea that the supernatural exists. Find trash can lids and that sort of thing. The guy on the cloth looks like a hippie. Yeah. Potential. I even granted to you that even if the Shroud is from the 1st century, that doesn't mean it's Jesus's. And this whole idea is, it has to be, it's 1 out of 89 million. I mean, come on. Come on. What's wrong with you and Habermas? What's wrong with you for believing Habermas? You need to let go of this nonsense. You need to come to grips with that experience you had of Jesus years ago was in your head. Oh, I'm being nasty now. I understand your ad hoc reasoning, Otangelo. I get what you're saying. You have to say that there's multiple strips. That way you can keep the Shroud intact and the Gospel of John. This is called harmonization. This is called desperation to believe that what you believe is true. Oh, poker. In 2 hours, 15 minutes. Email me. Poof. My apologies to Gary Habermas. He was scheduled to come on, but I made him cry last time and he felt bad and he never wants to debate again.